Chapter 275. Therefore, the solitary eagle and Lei Wu Bei were rushing towards the battlefield at top speed. But the two great masters were going all out. The great master Falcon was afraid that he would lose face if he fell behind. He had lost the upper hand in the contest of Xian Qi sound waves. So, how would he have the face to compete with Lei Wu Bei if he couldn't win in the field he was most proficient in? Lei Wu Bei had come to stand up for his disciple. So, it was taboo for him to break his own spirit. Therefore, he was forcing himself to chase after the solitary eagle. He wasn't willing to fall behind. Jun Moxie's yin-yang escape was marvelous, and its power was astonishing. But, his skill was still shallow. So, he couldn't fully grasp the mysteries of the yin-yang escape. So, how could he compare with these two great masters? To be honest, at his age and cultivation level, the fact that he could keep up with these two people was already shocking news that could shock the whole world. The two silhouettes, one in front and one behind, were like fleeting lights and passing shadows. And, they were like meteors from the outer sky. They passed through buildings in an instant. They had already escaped from the Tianxiang city, and had disappeared into the vast expanse of the city. A city with a population of 1 million people occupied a large area. But these two men had flown from the center of the city to the outside in only a few breaths' time. Jun Moxie reckoned that even an F-4 fighter jet from his previous life wouldn't be able to keep up with this kind of extreme speed. Jun Mo Xia was somewhat depressed when he saw that the two people in front of him had already disappeared from his line of sight. This is the first time in my second life that I've lost track of someone. He looked up again, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. It's really fate. I had just rescued a big trouble from this place this afternoon. And now, I'm back here in the middle of the night. Is the feng shui of this place particularly good? Jun Moxie looked left and right to confirm his own inference. This place was isolated in the wilderness, and there were no signs of human habitation in the surroundings. The forest was dense, and it was truly the best place to kill and rob. However, this loud and clear song did not come out in the end. Because at this moment, two extremely powerful auras suddenly erupted from the dense forest, and it was like a tsunami that drowned the entire dense forest. He had thought that the two old things had already gone far away, but it turned out that they had started fighting not far away. It seemed that not only was he satisfied with this boundary, but others were also satisfied. What a good place! Countless trees began to tilt in the opposite direction. The tree trunks issued a kacha-kacha sound, and it seemed as if they would break at any time. Jun Daxiao was about to take a break and sing a few songs when he almost fell down. He secretly cursed in his heart, these two old things don't have the slightest bit of fun. Don't they know that fighting also requires art? Then, he silently sneaked in. After all, it was very rare to get the opportunity to watch a battle between two great masters. Solitary Eagle and Lei Wu Bei stood facing each other in the middle of the dense forest, separated by a distance of 10 feet. The ground between the two men was exceptionally smooth. The trees that had grown there had silently turned into powder under the impact of the two men's auras, and had disappeared from the world. The ground was even than the basketball courts of his previous life. Why didn't these two old men go and build roads with such good craftsmanship? They should have gone to the remote mountainous areas to build roads. This is much smoother than an excavator or a road roller. It's also a lot more convenient. He clasped his hands behind his back and stared with his eyes wide open. Then, the road would have been smooth. It would have been a waste not to take advantage of this speed. The invisible and immaterial aura between the two men spread out in waves. Solitary Eagle's long hair had gradually become disheveled with the passage of time. It had begun to tilt back a little, and it seemed as if it would be blown away by the wind. However, Lei Wu Bei remained motionless. Even the hem of his clothes hadn't been raised. The difference between the two men's cultivation was obvious. Eagle, you've made a lot of progress these past few years. Lei Wu Bei snorted Lenglang, I'm not as fast as you, but you're far inferior to me in terms of Xian Qi. So, you'd better behave in front of me. Is that so? That's not necessarily true. Solitary Eagle suddenly soared into the sky. This leap was like a high-pressure spring that had suddenly bounced back. His entire body became like a javelin, and he shot straight into the sky. The solitary eagle had fallen into a disadvantageous position in terms of momentum. He was afraid that he would fall into Lei Wu Bei's aura if he were to continue like this. Then, he would be powerless to reverse the situation. Therefore, Solitary Eagle made a prompt decision and soared into the sky. He had to break through Lei Wu Bei's aura blockade first. Solitary Eagle was ranked last among the 8 great masters. His Xian Qi cultivation was also ranked last among the 8. This was a well-known fact. So, it wasn't strange. He wouldn't be worthy of the title of Great Master if he were to blindly entangle himself with the other great masters in terms of momentum. Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. The solitary eagle's strongest technique had never been his Xian Qi. The height of this leap had obviously exceeded the height that solitary eagle had originally been capable of. He had soared more than 20 feet into the sky. His entire body had turned into a fuzzy black dot in the night sky. A ghostly light flashed in Lei Wu Bei's eyes. He snorted, and didn't dare to be negligent. He used the tip of his toes as a pivot and suddenly lowered his body. Then, he rotated his arms, and his entire body spun like a spinning top. A small tornado had appeared on the ground in an instant. It was rolling up a strange black gas. The surrounding trees, grass, and soil were all rolled up. The tornado's scope was getting larger and larger, and the power of the tornado was getting stronger and stronger. A sharp whistling sound echoed in the air. It pierced the eardrums of everyone who heard it as it fell down like lightning. Boom! 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 Sonic booms echoed in the air. Solitary Eagle's speed had reached its limit. The friction between his clothes and his body had issued an intense piercing sound. Solitary Eagle's right hand was in front of him in the shape of a claw. His left hand was in front of his shoulder. His long black hair was perpendicular to the ground. But, his body was still falling. Solitary Eagle's entire body looked like a heaven-shaking sharp arrow that had been shot out of the battle between the gods and the demons. It whistled as it shot towards Lei Wu Bei. "Come at me!" Lei Wu Bei shouted coldly. The tornado on the ground suddenly rose up, and moved to meet the black figure in the sky. A pop sound was heard as the two collided. Then, the two enormous forces disappeared without a trace. Solitary Eagle stood in front of Lei Wu Bei once again. His claws had transformed into a myriad of transformations, and were now clawing towards Lei Wu Bei. Lei Wu Bei coldly snorted. Black gas curled around his palms. He didn't show the least bit of fear as he welcomed the attack. The four hands of the two men clashed hundreds of times in a split second. Suddenly, a bang sound was heard. Lei Wu Bei's body was sent flying upside down. Solitary Eagle's body also staggered backwards. As they flew and retreated, the space between them was instantly separated by several hundred feet. The two men were forced to retreat. Suddenly, a loud bang sound was heard from the point where the two forces had come into contact. It was followed by a powerful explosion. The aftermath of the explosion had even broken the tree that Jun Moxie had been hiding in. It was no less than 200 feet away. The aftermath of the explosion was astonishing. Hitman Jun was enjoying the duel between two of the world's 8 strongest experts with relish. Moreover, he was comparing the world's top martial arts techniques with his own. Even if he was just a spectator, he would still be able to gain a lot of benefits from watching such a battle between such strong experts. However, he hadn't expected that the tree he had been hiding in would suddenly break. Moreover, it had been broken into dozens of pieces. Jun Moxie had been flung away by the tree trunk he had been hiding in. He fell to the ground, and rolled twice. It had happened so suddenly that he hadn't had enough time to move. He was still in his invisible state, but it wasn't a good feeling. He had been thrown into confusion, and he had seen stars. It seemed that this was the first time in his 2 lives that he had been in such a difficult situation. He couldn't help but let out a muffled groan as he spoke in a very low voice. The volume of his groan was indeed very low. But it was no less than a thunderclap for the 2 great masters. Someone was peeping on us, and we didn't even notice it. The 2 men couldn't help but shout, "Who is it? Get out here!" Jun Mo Xia didn't dare to reveal his head at this moment. He shrunk his neck, and used the wood escape technique to quickly move to another tree. A thought flashed in his mind: the 2 great masters have already decided who is superior and who is inferior. The fight has only just begun. But it can be seen that Solitary Eagle isn't Lei Wu Bei's match for the time being. I'm afraid he'll suffer a loss if the fight drags on. It's like a fight between 2 moneybags. One only has 1 billion, and the other has 1.5 billion. The wealth of these 2 men is enough for them to squander as much as they want. But the one with 1.5 billion will win in the end. After all, his background is better. But Solitary Eagle is one of our own. Do I have to watch him make a fool of himself? If that's the case, then I'll give them a little trouble. Jun Moxie suddenly thought of a plan. He let out a cold snort, and his voice was full of disdain. Then, he moved again. 2 silhouettes appeared like meteors chasing after the moon, and landed in the same place where he had just made that sound. However, the yin-yang escape technique was truly marvelous. It was so easy to hide under the eyes of the 2 great masters. The 2 great masters carefully searched the area, but found nothing. They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. They were extremely shocked in their hearts. This person's Xian cultivation is in no way inferior to ours. In fact, it might even be stronger. Who is this person? What is his purpose? That cold snort was clearly disdainful. It's as if he's looking down on us. Who is this arrogant? Solitary Eagle suddenly came to his senses. He then scolded, "Lei Wu Bei, you're too shameless. You've actually invited a helper. I despise you. You have the nerve to call yourself one of the 8 great masters with your conduct? Bullshit." Lei Wu Bei was furious. "Why would I need a helper to deal with someone like you? What a joke. Is it your helper? Solitary Falcon, don't you dare shout 'Stop the thief' in this place. You might as well come out and teach me a lesson." Chapter 276. What do I have to fear even if you have a helper? The Solitary Eagle sneered. His hands lit up, and transformed into eagle claws. He snorted and said, "Lei Wu Bei, your Xian Qi cultivation is indeed a hair above mine. I admit that. But the key to victory or defeat isn't just the level of your Xian Qi. You're lucky today. I'll open your eyes. I've just created a peerless martial art, and I'll use it on you, the 5th great master." Jia. The Solitary Falcon's silhouette sped up again amidst his laughter, and became even more erratic. In fact, it seemed as if he was a shapeless ghost. Suddenly, the entire world seemed to be filled with the whistling sound of an eagle's claws, and a fierce wind crisscrossed each other in an unimaginable manner. In fact, it seemed as if it had formed an impenetrable net. If this was an eagle, then it must be the soul of the eagle that was attacking. The 9 claws of the ghostly eagle. Good eagle claws. Lei Wu Bei shouted loudly. He had never seen such a marvelous eagle claw before. He screamed, and counterattacked with all his might. Chi. Lei Wu Bei had suffered a loss from this marvelous martial art. The Solitary Eagle's claws had cut his body 3 times in a row. Lei Wu Bei knew that the situation wasn't good. He was startled, but he didn't panic. Instead, he steadily retreated. However, the Solitary Eagle didn't show any mercy. He screamed, and launched his second move. The Solitary Eagle had only comprehended the first 2 moves of the 9 claws of the ghostly eagle so far. His confidence was boosted when he saw that his first attack was effective. He struck while the iron was hot, and launched his second move. Bang! 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 Lei Wu Bei's body was clawed a few times. He suddenly roared, and a black aura pervaded his body. Then, his Xian Qi gathered like a tsunami. Lei Wu Bei was the fifth great master. He was cornered by the solitary eagle. So, he didn't hold back any longer. He went all out, and launched his cold-blooded finger technique. There was a loud explosion, and the two men staggered back. Lei Wu Bei couldn't believe it. He stared blankly at the 5 bloody claw marks on his chest. He then raised his head. What's the name of this eagle claw? How many moves? Solitary Eagle's face was flushed and his chest was heaving up and down rapidly. Langlang said, "How does my new move taste?" This was called the 9 forms of the ghostly eagle. As the name suggests, there are a total of 9 moves. It's an eye-opener, isn't it? 9 moves? Such a strange move, there are actually 9 moves. 9 forms of ghostly eagle? Lei Wu Bei snorted and said, "Solitary eagle, you're different from before. There's something fishy about today's matter. This old man has no interest in wasting time with you. Let's drop it for now." "Humph, I'll come looking for you at any time." The solitary eagle laughed heartily and said, "How's the taste of my unique skill? If you want to spar with me, I'll be waiting for you at any time." "Solitary eagle, since we're all part of the 8 Supremes, I'll warn you again. Stay away from the Jun family and you'll be safe." Lei Wu Bei snorted, "The Jun family has provoked 2 major forces at the same time. And now, this old man is involved as well. I won't hesitate to get involved if necessary. Solitary eagle, I don't want to see you around when this old man exterminates the Jun family. Otherwise, I won't let you off so easily." "Exterminate the Jun family? Why?" The solitary eagle snorted coldly, "Since when did a solitary eagle need to listen to you, Lei Wu Bei, when I do things? It's not too late to talk nonsense when you're confident that you can break my 9 moves of the ghostly eagle. You're unrepentant. You're acting recklessly." Lei Wu Bei snorted in a low voice. Then, his body rose up, and he disappeared without a trace. Lei Wu Bei stopped as soon as he saw that the situation wasn't right. The solitary falcon's 9 style of the ghostly falcon was truly strange and unpredictable. Moreover, each of his moves was stronger than the last, and he felt threatened by them. In fact, he was no longer as confident as he had been before. If the solitary falcon really had a helper here, then his reputation would inevitably go down the drain. Therefore, Lei Wu Bei made a prompt decision and fled far away. The solitary eagle was silent for a long time. Then, he sighed softly, "That was close. That was close." Lei Wu Bei was ranked 5th among the 8 great masters. So, it wasn't without reason. The fight seemed to have ended in a tie. However, the solitary eagle knew that he had been defeated. His 9 moves of the ghostly eagle had been very fruitful. But, it had been revealed. So, it would be difficult for him to reap any unexpected benefits in the future. This meant that he had used up all of his trump cards. But, his opponent's cold-blooded finger technique had only just begun. Lei Wu Bei had been subdued by his 2 marvelous eagle's claws. Moreover, they hadn't found any traces after that inexplicable and muffled groan. The 2 of them had no desire to continue fighting from that moment on. He was afraid that while the 2 of them were fighting, someone else would take advantage of them. They couldn't afford to not guard against this. If the 2 of them were to fight to the end, it was a sure thing that both of them would suffer. Killing 2 great masters in one fell swoop. What kind of crazy reputation was that? Who wouldn't want to do that? Therefore, after exchanging 2 blows, the 2 of them stopped at the same time. I would have made a fool of myself if I hadn't practiced the 9 moves of the ghostly eagle and comprehended the first 2 moves. Lei Wu Bei's strength is truly above mine. He's worthy of being called a cold-blooded master. I should be grateful to the person who made that sound, regardless of his motives. It seems that I need to hurry up. I must master the 9 moves of the ghostly eagle in the shortest time possible. With a sigh, the solitary falcon flew away. The young Master Jun had already left before the two of them had left. Jun Dashao's heart was full of anger at this moment. But he had nowhere to vent it. The hitman Jun was extremely angry at Lei Wu Bei's words. Yes, that's right. Our Jun family has a grudge against two powerful forces. But that doesn't mean that anyone can step on our Jun family. The Jun family has provoked two powerful forces at the same time. Even this old man won't hesitate to take action if necessary. Solitary Eagle, this old man doesn't want you to be present when I exterminate the Jun family. Otherwise, I won't let you off so easily. Jun Moxie's belly was full of anger as he thought of Lei Wu Bei's words. This is a clear threat to Solitary Eagle to leave the Jun family. Damn it! I've spent a lot of effort to trick a great master into becoming a bodyguard. So what if you're the fifth great master? Fu *k. You're only the fifth great master. So what if you're the first great master, Yunbi Chen? I'll play you to death as soon as I get the chance. Why are you waiting for an opportunity? Let's play now. Let's see who's better. Jun Moxie's anger flared up in his heart. Motherfucker, out of your 10 disciples, 4 have died. It seems that the number of deaths is still too little. I can't deal with you for the time being. And I can't deal with your Tian Xian apprentices either. But I can kill your crippled apprentices. Isn't that a piece of cake? Aren't you worried about your apprentices? I might as well make you feel heartache. The evil monarch was furious. Hitman Jun couldn't help but think of the Jun family's ancestral teachings. If you have a bird between your legs, you must be a man. Indomitable spirit. That's right. Go to hell. Go to hell. Jun Imo Xia cursed angrily. Then, he used the Yin-Yang escape at full speed, and returned to the city like a wisp of smoke. I don't care if you're the fifth great master or the sixth great master. If I don't make you cry today, I'll tear off my penis and make it into a kite for you. Jun Imo Xia's speed was much faster than when he had arrived. He searched the entire way, inside and out, but didn't find anything. Don't tell me those people aren't staying at the Li family's residence? This is a big mess. What's going on? Jun Dashao scratched his head. Then, he stamped his foot and dived into the ground. He slowly searched, and listened for any movements above. Then, he looked for a secret underground room. 1 lap, 2 laps, and finally, an indistinct voice from above caught Jun Moxie's attention. Xian Beast Tendon Crossbow, this matter is of great importance. Be careful, but it's a good thing. These words were intermittent, but they drilled into Jun Moxie's ears. Jun Moxie suddenly became vigilant. He followed the source of the voice, and slowly approached. I've been eyeing the Xian Beast Tendon Crossbow, and there's someone here who wants to get their hands on it. This is an unexpected harvest. This batch of Xian Beast Tendon and Adamantine Iron can be used to create the best quality crossbow. Its lethality is enormous. Let alone ordinary soldiers, even an Earth Xian expert would be caught off guard. It was truly a rare killing weapon. It's a pity that we have no choice but to give up this time. A voice sighed. Why should we give up? Brotherly, we can't let this matter go so easily. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your Li family. Those things are ready-made. Moreover, the lethality of those crossbows will be extremely terrifying after they've been specially made. Don't tell me you want to let this opportunity go. Why? A voice asked anxiously. Jun Moxie could tell that this voice belonged to the eldest brother, Lei Jianhong. It sounded very urgent, as if he was trying to persuade someone. Eldest brother, how could I not know that these crossbows are of great importance? A clear and bright voice said. It was extremely elegant and reserved. It was clear and refined. One could imagine how outstanding the appearance of this person was just by listening to his voice. He continued, but these 10 brothers have come to Tianxiang City to help me. I, Li Yuran, haven't done anything for the sect. Instead, I've been taught by my master, and doted on by my brothers and sisters. I'm ashamed. Now, 4 of my brothers have been buried forever in Tianxiang City because of me. 3 of them have been crippled for the rest of their lives. This has made me extremely remorseful. How can I have the face to ask my brothers and sisters to help me? Wouldn't I, Li Yuan, be worse than a beast if any of them were to meet with misfortune? Brother Li, why are you treating me like an outsider? We are all fellow apprentices. Your problem is our problem. Lei Jianhong anxiously said, besides, who knows what that idiot will do if the second prince gets his hands on those crossbows? He'll be a great threat. If the second prince succeeds, then not only the Jun family, but your Li family will also be a part of the emperor's power. How can you be left out? Brother, this matter cannot be delayed. You've always been decisive. How can you be so long-winded? Today is the birthday of my book friend, the tree that has been punished. Here, I wish my brother a happy birthday. Every year, this day will come. I want to say, once a brother, always a brother. Chapter 277. No, senior brother, I really appreciate your kind intentions. Li Yuan seemed to be in pain as he shook his head. Eldest brother, do you know? Every night, when I close my eyes, I see my 4 senior brothers standing in front of me. Their bodies are drenched in blood and riddled with scars. I, Li Yuan, am ashamed to face them. This time, the second prince will certainly use his strongest force to escort the crossbows to the capital. There will be countless experts either in the open or in the dark. If eldest brother and you meet with any mishap, then I might as well just die. The people above were moved to sigh. Jun Moxie couldn't help but curse in his heart, pretentious. Pretentious. This Li Yuan is too pretentious. He has definitely reached the level of a grandmaster. In fact, he is almost on par with me. Why did you deliberately mention this matter in front of them if you didn't intend to let them take action? Now, you mention it and explain how powerful it is. Moreover, you clearly state that it is a threat to you. But, you change your mind and say that you don't want it, even if you tried to stop them in every possible way, even if you really refused to let them go, these senior brothers would still secretly go. This kind of scheming is really amazing. I've underestimated this kid in the past. You obviously want these people to be your cannon fodder. But, you want them to be moved to the point that they say it themselves. You make them feel as if they owe you something. And, you make them feel that you are so great and reluctant, damn it. Pretentious isn't like this. Sure enough. How can we do that? The 3 voices above shouted at the same time, how can we watch junior brother's entire family fall into such a dangerous situation and sit back and do nothing? What kind of people would we be? What kind of people does junior brother think we are? Besides, if the Li family obtains those crossbows, we will be able to relax a little. There is no need to mention this matter again. It is decided. When the time comes, the 3 of us will take action. We must snatch the mysterious beast crossbows for junior brother Li, and hand them over to junior brother in one piece. If little junior brother is really worried, just send more subordinates to help us. Eldest senior brother. Second senior brother. Third senior sister. Li Yuan seemed to be so touched that she couldn't speak, but her attitude seemed to be more and more determined. But, how can I agree? I really feel guilty. I really have a guilty conscience. You're a man, so why are you being so wishy-washy? Where is your usual determination? It was a woman's voice. It seemed to be the 3rd martial sister. Junior martial brother Li. If you don't let us go, are you just going to watch the entire Li clan slowly fall into a dangerous situation? The kindness of the sect is great. I'd rather let my own sect fall into a dangerous situation than let my senior brothers and senior sisters take such a great risk. It was obvious that Li Yuan spoke these words while gritting his teeth, and it was resolute and decisive. Nonsense. The other 3 were furious. They slammed the table and stood up, filled with righteous indignation. Lei Jianhong was the first to speak. "Junior Marshal Brotherly, you'll look down on us if you speak like that again. You won't recognize us as your fellow disciples. Then, I'll leave immediately, and I'll never see you again, Li Yuran." These words were spoken with a heroic spirit that could reach the clouds, and with complete sincerity. Jun Dashao, who was eavesdropping underground, was laughing so hard that he was about to cramp up. What the hell is this? Lei Wu Bei's disciples are all such trash. I reckon that Lei Wu Bei himself isn't any better, in that case. Senior Marshal Brother, you must be careful. Li Yuran was so moved that she started to choke with sobs. Her enunciation became somewhat unclear. "Please be careful, Senior Marshal Brothers. I'd rather not have these crossbows, but I want my Senior Marshal sisters to return safely. I'll deploy the greatest forces to assist my Senior Marshal sisters. Senior Marshal sisters, please don't be stingy with your manpower. It doesn't matter even if all of us are sacrificed. As long as my Senior Marshal brothers and Senior Marshal sisters can return safely, I won't hesitate. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. Wait for our good news, Junior Marshal Brother." The three of them patted their chests with a loud pa-pa sound. They were full of heroic sentiments, and were brimming with a heroic spirit. Jun Moxie finally stopped laughing. Instead, he sighed deeply in his heart. They've been sold by Li Yuran, and yet they're still helping him count the money. It seems that these three have been thoroughly brainwashed by Li Yuran. Lei Wu Bei's son and his two disciples are really stupid. No wonder the five of them had besieged Yi Gahan, but the results were so bleak. It's pitiful that people don't have wisdom. Thank you, Senior Marshal sisters. According to my information, those crossbows should arrive at the southern outskirts of the capital in 13 days. We'll act according to the plan when the time comes. I reckon that Li Yuran would be bowing deeply. Then, the three of them began to discuss the specifics of the plan. Jun Moxie listened for a while, and understood. Then, he lost interest in listening to Li Yuran play with these fools. That's because he suddenly had a new plan in mind. Of course, that's for later. This is the time to kill. Hitman Jun hadn't forgotten his original purpose for coming here. Even if he had heard some important news, it wouldn't hinder Jun Moxie's determination to kill. He silently rose up from the ground and looked around. He discovered that he was currently in a spacious courtyard. Jun Moxie looked around, and finally understood why he hadn't been able to find them in the Li Mansion. This place is outside the Li Mansion. This is a courtyard next to the Li Mansion. No wonder. He turned around again, and heard a painful groan coming from a room surrounded by a verdant bamboo forest. Jun Moxie's mouth curled into a cruel smile. His body flashed, and he entered the room. The room was filled with the smell of medicine. The three brothers were quietly lying on the soft mattresses, twitching from time to time. Their faces were deathly pale. "Oh! It's really pitiful. Seeing you in so much pain, let me, your big brother, save you from the sea of suffering." Jun Moxie bemoaned the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind, but he had already taken down a large sword hanging on the wall. It seemed that one of the three had been carrying a weapon with him. He suddenly raised it, and with lightning speed, without any hesitation, and without blinking, he chopped it up and down like he was chopping dumpling fillings. Puff puff puff, the three of them had already suffered fatal injuries. It was quite amazing that they were still breathing at this moment. How could they resist? They didn't even have time to breathe before they met their tragic end. Blood splattered everywhere, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The last one was the sixth senior brother with outstanding Qinggong. He watched helplessly as the steel saber suddenly floated in the air. Just when he was wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him, he saw the steel saber fall down like lightning. The heads of the senior brother and the junior brother beside him strangely separated from their bodies with a pu sound. They rolled away like watermelons falling off the seedlings. He was extremely frightened, and was about to open his mouth to cry out in alarm. Suddenly, something covered his mouth, and prevented him from making a sound. It seemed like a warm hand, but why can't I see it? Why can't I see it? Do ghosts really exist in this world? Just as he thought of this, he saw the uncontrollable knife slashing down on his neck. The hitman June stopped. Lang picked up a piece of cloth, and dipped it in the blood on the ground. She smiled mischievously, and wrote a few crooked words on the wall. I killed 4 of them that day, and it wasn't satisfying enough. Today, I'm going to chop down 3 more, and they're all half dead. How can it be satisfying enough? I'll chop down the last 3 in a few days. If it's not satisfying enough, then it'll be your turn, my dear cold-blooded elder sister Wu Bei. She thought for a moment, and then added a few more words on the wall. Then, she left in a satisfied manner. The side room was several dozen feet away from the main room where Li Yuran and the others were located. The hitman June's movements were swift, and the process was fast. Although he had used a lot of strength, he had chopped down on a defenseless human body, and hadn't made much noise. Only a few puff sounds could be heard, and it was over. This was the basic skill of an excellent assassin, and wasn't a big deal. Besides, this blade was very sharp. Even if someone happened to hear it, they would only think that someone couldn't help but let out a few farts. Therefore, no one would realize that these people had been freed from the sea of suffering in this world, and had gone far away from the pain and suffering of the world. The hitman June had just escaped from the courtyard when he saw a silhouette floating towards him from a distance. The silhouette's hands were behind his back, and his movements were elegant and unrestrained. He was neither fast nor slow, and his eyebrows were slightly wrinkled. It seemed as if there was something he couldn't figure out. It was the world-famous cold-blooded master, Lei Wu Bei. You're too late, you old bastard. June Moxie smiled maliciously, and deliberately brushed past him. Lei Wu Bei seemed to have sensed something as June Moxie brushed past Lei Wu Bei. Lei Wu Bei's posture didn't change, but his aura rose to its peak in a split second. A burst of terrifying pressure surged towards him from all directions. June Moxie felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his head. He cursed inwardly, stuck out his tongue, and escaped into the Hongjun Pagoda. I can't afford to provoke you, but I can't hide from you. I'm in here right now. Come in if you have the guts. However, it seems that no one has been able to discover this before. So, why is Lei Wu Bei reacting this time? June Moxie squatted in the Hongjun Pagoda's main hall, and thought hard. Could it be that there's a flaw in my escape technique? Or could it be that these supreme beings have already discovered or sensed my abnormality? Or... I understand. June Moxie suddenly recalled that he had just killed someone. His body was still emitting a biting cold murderous aura. It seems that this murderous aura has made Lei Wu Bei feel danger. Plus, I'm hostile towards Lei Wu Bei. So, it's not surprising that Lei Wu Bei could sense it. So, I can conceal myself without any hostility or murderous aura. But, I can't conceal myself if I have any emotions. This also dispelled June Moxie's fantasies of assassinating a great master with his concealment technique. Chapter 278. Hitman June's thoughts were reasonable, but there were some discrepancies between them and the facts. The yin-yang escape was indeed a unique technique. Even the 8 great masters weren't capable of tracking June Mo Xie's whereabouts. However, the yin-yang escape could be used to conceal one's tracks without using the 5 elements escape technique. However, it wasn't a true escape into the void. It would always cause an anomaly in the flow of the air. In fact, this wasn't an anomaly. It was just a slight change in the flow of the air. However, most people wouldn't be able to detect such a subtle change. But who was Lei Wu Bei? He wouldn't be Lei Wu Bei if he couldn't detect it. He had already noticed the minute fluctuations in the air. However, the scene in front of him was too strange. He had never seen such a strong murderous aura in his entire life. He could infer that the other party's strength was at an unfathomable level. Therefore, Lei Wu Bei immediately released his own pressure to protect his body. However, Lei Wu Bei wouldn't be able to detect June Mo Xie's presence once he entered the Hongjun Pagoda. June Moxie felt a sense of loss as he thought about all this. He had already stayed in the pagoda for a while. So, he figured that Lei Wu Bei must have left by now. So, he rushed out again. He didn't know that Lei Wu Bei was still standing on the street. Lei Wu Bei's lightning-like eyes looked in Jun Moxie's direction the moment he came out of the pagoda. It was as if two balls of ghostly fire had suddenly flashed in the night sky. Crap! This old man is so free. Jun Moxie was depressed. He had no choice but to enter the pagoda again. He thought to himself, damn it. I won't come out before dawn. A great master never doubted his senses. Jun Mo Xie's aura had left a deep impression on Great Master Lei even though it had only been a fleeting moment. Therefore, he didn't dare to neglect it. Lei Wu Bei had returned to the pagoda after meeting with the solitary eagle. So, his speed had inevitably slowed down. Moreover, he had deliberately searched for traces of the mysterious person who had made that sound. So, his speed had naturally slowed down even more. He suddenly felt the air flow accelerate as he arrived at the pagoda. Then, he sensed a bloody murderous aura approaching him. He couldn't help but gather his Xian Qi and get ready. He could feel the sharpness of this murderous aura and how terrifying it was. Only the world's top assassins could bring out such a strong murderous aura. Such a strong and ferocious murderous aura was enough to assassinate him. Therefore, Lei Wu Bei didn't dare to be negligent. He released his formidable aura in an instant, and got ready for battle. This standard of measurement was naturally based on the murderous aura of the hitman. This murderous aura was something that was ingrained in Jun Moxie's bones. Although Jun Dashao didn't possess such tyrannical strength, but the murderous aura of the King of Assassins hadn't diminished in the slightest. Lei Wu Bei waited in silence with rapt attention for a while. He hadn't expected that there would be no sound at all. Even the biting cold murderous aura had disappeared without a trace. The surroundings were quiet and peaceful. Not even the slightest movement could be heard. He couldn't help but be amazed. Was it really my imagination? But how could I have imagined such a thing? He was very suspicious, and was about to get rid of this dangerous state of mind. Suddenly, the aura around him fluctuated again. That bloody murderous aura had appeared next to him. Moreover, it had appeared right next to him this time. There was no such thing as far away or near. Lei Wu Bei's mind was about to move, but that terrifying murderous aura suddenly disappeared. It disappeared without a trace. This had caused Lei Wu Bei's heart to be shocked to the extreme. What kind of assassin could have such a terrifying method? Lei Wu Bei's body suddenly broke into a cold sweat. That was because he had suddenly thought of a terrifying person. This person's Xian cultivation might not be as strong as Yun Bichen and Li Ju Tian. However, Lei Wu Bei felt that this person was more terrifying than those two combined. Because this person took lives, no one had been able to escape from his assassination in the past few decades. This person was a legend in the world of assassins. This person was a taboo in the world. Even Yun Bichen and Li Ju Tian didn't dare to underestimate this person. In fact, they didn't even dare to challenge him. He was a dreamlike and terrifying assassin. The world recognized him as the god of death. The supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan. Who else could have such a sharp and incisive murderous aura, except for Chu Chihuan, the supreme assassin? Who else could sneak up to me without me noticing, except for Chu Chihuan? Who else could disappear without a trace after I noticed his murderous aura, except for Chu Chihuan? There's no one else in the world who could do this. Even Yun Bichen and Li Ju Tian can't do this. They can defeat me. They can even kill me. But, they can't do what Chu Chihuan has done. He can come and go without leaving a trace. And, I can't even detect him. Lei Wu Bei became more and more certain as he thought about it. So, he became more cautious. And, the more cautious he became, the more intense his fear became. People are always full of doubt and fear when it comes to the unknown. Even the great master Shen Xian was no exception. Especially when his opponent was someone he couldn't deal with. Lei Wu Bei was confident that his Xian cultivation was in no way inferior to Chu Chihuan's. But, Chu Chihuan liked to launch sneak attacks. Lei Wu Bei would inevitably suffer a big loss if he was caught off guard. Being ambushed by an expert of the same level wasn't a joke. Lei Wu Bei was a little afraid at this moment. Chu Chihuan was a great master. But he wasn't one of the 8 great masters. This was because he never killed people head-on. In fact, Chu Chihuan could kill a weak scholar with a single breath. But Chu Chihuan would never attack him head-on. This supreme assassin followed the assassin's code of conduct meticulously. It could be said that he was abnormal. In fact, it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. But this supreme assassin wasn't one of the 8 great masters. However, Chu Chihuan wasn't one of the 8 great masters. But he was the most terrifying person in the world. And this was widely recognized. So much so that the 8 great masters had recognized him. Lei Wu Bei was very cautious. He paid attention to his surroundings with every step he took. Then, he spoke in a deep voice, "You must be the supreme assassin Chu Chihuan, Brother Chu?" He. I don't know how I've offended Brother Chu. I'm honored that Brother Chu has come here in person. But, you and I are both great masters. So, there's no harm in exchanging greetings before the fight, right? The autumn wind whistled, and the fallen leaves spiraled to the ground. But no one answered his question. In fact, it would have been strange if someone had answered. Only the great hitman Jun was hiding in the Hongjun Pagoda. But the hitman Jun wasn't willing to make a sound. He couldn't wait for Lei Wu Bei to misunderstand. The more the better. Brother Chu, are you really not going to give me any face? Lei Wu Bei clenched his teeth. His voice was burning with anger. Don't tell me that Brother Chu is determined to fight to the death with me? Still, there was no sound. Lei Wu Bei finally calmed down. But his aura was becoming more and more oppressive. It was like a volcano that was about to erupt. He spoke in a low voice, do you think I'm afraid of you? Good. Since Brother Chu is so confident, then come. Lei Wu Bei will be waiting for you. After saying this, his body suddenly rose up like a divine dragon, soaring through the 9 heavens, causing the wind and clouds to change, and in an instant, he disappeared without a trace. Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief as soon as Lei Wu Bei left. Jun Imo Xie had stuck half his head out to listen to Lei Wu Bei's solemn speech. Jun Imo Xie had almost laughed out loud when he saw Lei Wu Bei's solemn speech. However, he was also awed by the fact that his fellow assassin, Chu Chihuan, had a well-deserved reputation. Lei Wu Bei was ranked 5th among the 8 great masters. Even the cold-blooded master feared him. This supreme assassin is amazing. Being an assassin to this extent can be considered as reaching the pinnacle of perfection. Jun Moxie returned home in a relaxed and carefree manner as he fantasized about this supreme assassin. Lei Wu Bei's figure flashed, and he landed in the courtyard of that small courtyard. His body floated, and he pushed open the door. The 4 people inside stood up and respectfully said, "Master, you've returned." Lei Wu Bei snorted coldly, and sat down with an expressionless face. "Master, what was the result of this trip? That old solitary eagle must have learned his lesson, right?" Lei Jianhong was Lei Wu Bei's son. However, he had never addressed him as father in front of his fellow disciples. This was to show that he treated everyone equally. However, he was the only one who had the guts to ask such a question. This matter has changed. We'll discuss it later. Lei Wu Bei exhaled. He then said in a serious tone, "You must be more careful from now on. The situation in Tianxiang City is treacherous. There are crouching tigers and hidden dragons. There are countless experts in the city. So, you must think twice before you act." He thought for a long time. But, he eventually refrained from revealing the matter of the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan. Because to these disciples, this name was enough to scare them to the point that they did not dare to do anything. Although the cultivation of these disciples had reached the sky-profound realm, their own realms were very low. Rashly letting them know about this would only bring them harm and no benefit. Chu Chihuan has made up his mind to deal with me. So, he won't do anything to my disciples before the outcome of the battle is decided. So, why should I tell them about this and make them so nervous? The 4 disciples weren't fools. They knew that Solitary Eagle's matter wasn't going as smoothly as they had imagined. So, they tactfully kept their mouths shut, and didn't ask any more questions. Lei Wu Bei stood up and said indifferently, "Let's go. Let's go and see the 6th brother and the others. Let's see if we can restore their Xian Qi. We'll have to send them to the Poison King if it doesn't work." Lei Jianhong and the others trembled. They then cried out in alarm, "Master!" Lei Wu Bei snorted. He didn't reply. Instead, he walked out. The 4 disciples followed him with heavy expressions on their faces. They remembered that Lei Wu Bei had mentioned the Poison King a moment ago. Their hearts sank. The Son of Heaven's Iron Bones, the Great Wall Resistance War was in full swing. And he led the soldiers of the 24th and 17th armies to kill the Japanese. Their corpses were strewn all over the field. Everything was wonderful in the legend of the Iron Bones hero, Ni. Chapter 279. The next day. The sky was still dark. Jun Moxie hadn't gotten out of bed yet. He was studying his beautiful dream on his bed. He was embarrassed to find that his underwear was no longer wearable. It was a big wet lump. He touched it with his hand, and found that it had become somewhat hard. "This is really shameful." Something like a wet dream actually happened to me, the hitman Jun. This kind of shameful thing, my God, who would believe me if I told them about it? My heroic reputation has been swept to the ground. Jun Dashao hastily pulled the quilt to cover his lost first-time body. He sneakily poked his head out to check. Then, he hastily bent his legs and lifted his buttocks to take off his underwear. "If I don't take it off, it will be too uncomfortable." With a schwa sound, his movements were incomparably agile. He had already taken off his body. Then, he used his hand to pull it out from under the quilt. He wanted to find a suitable place to throw it away, but, suddenly, bang! At this critical moment, the door was suddenly slammed open. Grandpa Jun's white beard fluttered in the wind. His face was full of anxiety as he rushed in. He opened his mouth and shouted loudly, "You brat, why haven't you gotten up yet? How long are you going to stay here? This is what they mean by, there's no such thing as a book. This is such an embarrassing moment, and I've actually bumped into him. And it's a man, an old man." At this moment, Jun Dashao simply had the urge to commit suicide. He quickly pulled his outstretched hand back into the quilt. Then, he vaguely replied, I'll get up. Can't you go out first? What are you holding in your hand?" Grandpa Jun suddenly became suspicious. Not only did he not go out, he took 2 steps forward, raised his eyebrows and shouted, "Take it out for this old man to see." "It's nothing, really nothing." Jun Mo Xia felt that he had never been in such a difficult situation in his 2 lives. He curled up under the covers and complained, "Grandpa, you're too careless. I'm still asleep, and you just barged in like that. Fortunately, you don't have a wife yet. If I had found you a granddaughter-in-law, would you have just barged in like that?" What kind of words were those? Grandpa Jun was immediately angered to the point of blowing his beard and glaring at him. Black lines appeared on his forehead and he saw stars. "Evil creature! What are you talking about? This old man, why don't you take it out? Do you really want this old man to go through the trouble?" Regardless of the consequences, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the quilt. How could a rookie like Jun Moxie resist the power of Tian Xian's expert? Suddenly, with a whooshing sound, it opened up, revealing a peeled egg-like object in front of Grandpa Jun. The object was black in the middle, and the long spear was still trembling. It was extremely thick, and it was shaking its head in a perfectly straight manner. Jun Moxie was not mentally prepared. He cried out in alarm and quickly covered his crotch with both hands. He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. Suddenly, he steeled his heart. Since he had already lost all face, he might as well throw away his hands. He stood up from the bed and gracefully shook his buttocks. He took 2 cat-like steps and faced the fossilized Grandpa June. "Grandpa, didn't you just want to take a look? Now, do you see it?" Grandpa June seemed to have woken up from a dream. He could not help but blush. He swung his arm and slapped June Moxie's buttocks. His voice was crisp and melodious. "I see, you bastard." He suddenly reached out and snatched the object from June Moxie's hands. "I want to see what you are hiding." Why did it feel a little wet? The old man didn't think of that for a moment and was stunned for a moment. He raised the ball of cloth to his nose and sniffed it. Suddenly, he smelled a familiar and strange smell that he hadn't felt for a long time. In an instant, Grandpa June completely woke up. His old face turned red. He threw the object away and fiercely pounced on it. "This old man will beat you to death, you little shameless bastard." Instantly, blood-curdling screams could be heard. It was extremely miserable. Third Master June heard the screams from afar and hurried over. Coincidentally, he saw his father coming out of June Moxie's room with a red face. He was so angry that his beard was blowing, but there was a faint smile in the corner of his eyes. "Father, did Amos make you angry again?" Third Master June asked cautiously. "Amos, that little bastard." Grandpa June shook the object in his right hand. He silently opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he did not say anything. He shook his head for a long time. Finally, he said, "Sigh, the child has grown up, it is time to find a wife." With his hands behind his back, he slipped away. Only when he was outside the door did he remember the purpose of his visit. He shouted from afar, "That's right, third brother. Tell this little bastard to get ready. His Majesty wants to see him." Then, he disappeared with a whoosh. Today's matter had made Grandpa June, the commander of the entire nation's army, feel particularly humiliated. He was a hero of his generation. But today, he actually saw his grandson's lethal weapon. And he even took that thing. What a disgrace. The problem was, while he was feeling depressed, he also could not help but want to laugh. He even had a sense of comfort in his heart. He's grown up. He can already do that. That capital is not bad. It's almost catching up to this old man when he was young. Although it's still a little less than this old man, it's definitely enough. Not to mention, he's only 16. There's still a lot of room for growth. Hurry up and spread the leaves for our June family. Grandpa June hugged his chest as if he was hugging a baby. It seemed as if he was revising something. His old face suddenly blossomed into a smile. After a while, Third Master June saw that his miraculous nephew was acting so low-key for the first time. He lowered his head like a young lady. He pulled at his clothes here and there as he walked out. It seemed as if something was wrong. What's going on? Why can't I understand your grandfather? Is he angry or happy? What kind of expression is that? He's scolding you and smiling at the same time. Hurry up and give me an explanation. Third Master June was confused. June Dashao raised his head helplessly. He had an embarrassed look on his face. Then, he sincerely cupped his hands in obeisance. "Third uncle, I beg you, don't ask any more. This matter was not something that could be explained face to face." Although the thickness of young Master June's skin was definitely twice as thick as the Great Wall of China, but even a super thick skin would have its weaknesses. This matter was truly too shameful. It was really not a small matter. Jun Wui finally learned about this matter from his father's mouth at mealtime. Solitary Eagle also heard about it at the same time. Jun Wui's rice turned into 2 white lines, and came out of his nostrils. In fact, it almost sprayed onto Solitary Eagle who was sitting across from him. The Solitary Eagle didn't get angry even though he had almost been sprayed. He only had a strange expression on his face for a moment. Then, he laughed so hard that he almost choked. He hadn't been this happy in a long time. In fact, he was even happier than he had been when he had fought Lei Wu Bei to a draw the day before. It was very interesting. Jun Moxie and his grandson didn't pay any attention to the blood general who was lying in his wheelchair after they had finished their breakfast. The great master's solitary eagle seemed to have no energy left in him. Then, they mounted their horses, and went straight to the imperial palace. Only Jun Wui and solitary eagle were left behind. They were laughing so hard that they were on the verge of going berserk. The reason why the emperor suddenly wanted to see Jun Moxie was that he had gone crazy. He wanted to hold the scholarly scholars' feast that had already been missed. Moreover, he wanted to hold it at the imperial palace. This was a very unusual thing. The Minister of Rites, Sun Chenghe, had been in charge of this event since the night before. He had been running around until his legs had broken. Naturally, the old masters of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute were even busier than him. Many students had been looking forward to this grand event. But, they had been told that the event had been cancelled. They had been disappointed for a long time. Then, they had received news that it had been urgent. The event had been decided at night. But, it had to be held tomorrow. How many people wouldn't be able to participate? Several white-haired old masters cursed in their hearts. What's going on? Even if we're in a hurry to drink milk, we'll still have to do it, but there's nothing we can do about it. The emperor is the most important person in this world. He said that it would be held today. So, it must be today. If we offend His Majesty the Emperor, he might cancel the event in anger. Then, wouldn't it be the same as us burying the golden path of the students? Not only was the timing tight this time, but the location was also strange. Moreover, the scale of the event was unprecedentedly grand. Not only were the young masters of the aristocratic families invited, but the 3 princes and several princesses were also invited. Even the talented women of the aristocratic families weren't rejected. They were invited as long as they could come. Therefore, the names of the notorious debauches like Jun Moxie and Fatty Tang were also on the list. They had received invitations. The old man's face was calm and collected. He didn't say anything along the way. Jun Moxie also felt that something was wrong. The grandfather and grandson felt that this so-called scholarly scholars' feast wasn't going to be a good feast. It was too abnormal. It was too abnormal. It was outrageous. Jun Moxie had a faint feeling that there was an invisible net covering him. Jun Moxie couldn't understand it no matter how he thought about it. Why am I having such a strange feeling? Motherfucker, they should be targeting anyone but me. I am admittedly talented and knowledgeable. I am well versed in poetry, music, chess, calligraphy and painting. But these people don't know this. Who do I think I am in their eyes? Moxia. Today's matter, this old man feels that something is wrong. Jun Zhantian's eyes were dignified. You must hide as much as possible. In order to reassure his grandfather, Jun Moxie smiled cheerfully. Grandfather, you don't trust me. I am the best at playing the fool. I am the #1 debauchee in Tianxiang. Why would I need to hide? I am stupid. Little brat. Jun Zhantian was amused by him. He couldn't help but feel the pressure on him lessen. A mountain of flesh stood in front of the imperial palace. Jun Moxie took a look. Ha, it's an acquaintance. It's Fatty Tang, a pair of brothers in hardship. None of them were left behind. Jun Zhantian went to attend the morning court. As for the debauchee Jun and Fatty Tang, one was squatting on the ground, while the other was leaning against the wall. Both of them had an evil appearance. They didn't have any image to speak of. They were chatting amongst themselves. The young masters and scholars of the various families were wearing bright clothes. They were in high spirits and were free and at ease. They were completely incompatible with these 2 men. Seeing the 2 men acting so indolently, they hid far away from them. Those who didn't know them began to inquire about them. Who are these 2 men? How can they be so disrespectful? Someone asked. Chapter 280. What? Should I know? Are they famous? The person who asked was surprised. Could it be that these two wretched and smug fellows were actually some kind of great figures? But looking at them, it doesn't look like it. You should know about the four pests of the capital, right? The other person narrowed his eyes and said, I know about them. They are Fat Pig Tang, Evil Tyrant June, the bugs in the toilet and the flies on the dining table. Could it be? Yes. The two in front of us are the legendary Fat Pig Tang and Evil Tyrant June. They are the two pests of the world, the bugs in the toilet and the flies on the dining table. No wonder I had the urge to beat them up the moment I saw them. So that's why. The four pests of the capital, TSK, they really live up to their reputation. Yeah, it's really a disgrace to our culture. How could these scum be qualified to attend the gifted scholar feast? The moral degeneration of the world is getting worse and worse. Sigh. Sigh. I can't believe I can stand side by side with these scum. I want to smash my head on the ground. I feel so ashamed. A long sigh was heard. Discussions like these spread like wildfire. Everyone looked askance at the famous two great evils, pointing at them and whispering to each other. Everyone's eyes were filled with contempt, and their faces were filled with disdain. June Moxie and Tang Yuan acted as if they didn't hear anything. Fatty, do you remember what I said to you that day? June Moxie asked in a low voice. I can't forget. Tang Yuan opened his eyes lazily. You don't trust me? I'm afraid that your heart is covered with lard and your eyes are full of fat. Fuck. June Moxie scolded him. A gentleman doesn't need to be dignified. That's what my grandpa said. Tang Yuan shook his head proudly. How dare you call yourself a gentleman? June Moxie retched. Besides, how could there be a true gentleman in this world? After settling Fatty's side, June Moxie was slightly relieved. The rest was up to him. Damn it. Today, I'll let you idiots see what a real hooligan is. I'll kill all of you. Wait here and do nothing. How could I have that much time? Humph humph, today I will be a rogue to the end. Who's that? I'm talking to you. What are you looking at? Do I look good? June Moxie narrowed his eyes and asked a guy who was sneaking a peek at him. He recognized this fellow. He was from the Meng clan. Previously, he participated in the framing of Fatty Tang with Meng Haizu. He seemed to be called Meng Fei, but now, of course, he pretended not to know him. Nothing much. The guy named Meng Fei was also very arrogant. He squinted his eyes and tilted his head, showing the back of June Moxie's head. Of course, those who received the invitation, which one of them didn't have some status? The Meng clan was not a small clan, fuck. June Moxie let out a weird yell. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to take off his clothes as he rushed forward. Who the fuck are you? Do you know who you're talking to? Fuck. What are you looking at? Look at your mother's head. Look at me. If you keep looking, I'll dig your eyeballs out and stuff them into your testicles, do you believe me? June Dashao straightened his neck. His veins were bulging. He gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes, spittle flying everywhere. Even in his wildest dreams, Meng Fei had never imagined that he would attract such an undeserved calamity just by looking at it. Everyone else was looking, so why was he the only one to suffer? He almost vomited blood after being scolded. His face turned red and he stuttered a few times. He was so angry that he could not speak. Forget it. Third young master, there's no need to lower yourself to the level of these vulgar people. Fatty Tang hurriedly mediated and said magnanimously. It was time for him to make an appearance. The two of them had been friends for a long time. Fatty Tang and June Moxie's teamwork was flawless. He pulled June Moxie back. Stay alert. We still need to amaze the world in the throne room later. Show off our unparalleled talents. Maybe His Majesty will be happy and reward us with the title of Prime Minister or Grand Preceptor to satisfy his craving for being an official. That's true. June Moxie stroked his hair and swung it arrogantly. I won't lower myself to the level of these vulgar people. The two of them echoed each other, causing everyone around them to have a strong urge to vomit. Just the two of you? Amaze the world with unparalleled talents? Become Grand Preceptor of the Prime Minister? Fuck me. I've finally seen what it means to be a donkey that doesn't know its own face. What an eye-opener, June Moxie. What do you mean? Do you think I'm easy to bully? The greasy-haired Meng Fei was tongue-tied for a long time. Then, he finally calmed down and flew into a rage. Everyone saw it. This brat was the one who stirred up trouble. You can't blame me for that. June Moxie spread out his hands like an innocent victim. I thought that since we're all friends, we're not outsiders. Isn't that right? Just saying a few words is enough. But, this guy is unforgiving. What is this place? This is the Imperial Palace. How dare he roar like this? Humph. Do you want to rebel? Or is the Meng family plotting to usurp the throne? Everyone fainted. Too shameless. He was simply too shameless. Even if it's a groundless accusation, it's still too outrageous. You talk nonsense. Meng Fei almost fainted. Even his body was trembling like a leaf in the wind. The debauchee June didn't slow down. He rushed over and slapped Meng Fei's face a few times. Then, he stamped his foot on Meng Fei's belly. His movements were swift and natural. Meng Fei was caught off guard. Moreover, he hadn't expected that this guy would dare to fight in the Imperial Palace. Meng Fei was beaten senseless. He could only see a golden light flashing in front of his eyes. Then, he bent over like a shrimp clutching his belly. June Dashao was merciless. So, how could he let go of this opportunity? He jumped up, and let out a strange, oh yeah sound. Then, he knocked Meng Fei to the ground. Then, June Dashao's legs spun like a whirlwind, and madly rushed towards Meng Fei's face. The greasy-haired Meng Dashao had turned into a pig's head. He was even fatter than Tang Yuan. Everyone started to clamor. This June Moxie was too lawless. Forget it, young Master June, forgive and forget. A young man's face was filled with indignation. He pulled June Moxie back when he was about to raise his foot again. Everyone saw that there was a good show to watch. They were the people of the oldest families in the capital. They wanted to see how June Moxie, the biggest debauchee, would step down. Who are you? Do you have the right to speak here? Who do you think you are? Do you know what crime this Meng Fei has committed? You're muddle-headed and you want to come out and fight? Are you tired of living? June Moxie's eyes were closed. He straightened his waist, tilted his body, and twisted his buttocks. His whole body formed an S shape. He put his left hand on his waist and tilted his head. He looked like a giant teapot. I am Murong Qianli, the third generation of the Murong family. The young man in embroidered robes had a proud expression on his face. He raised his chin slightly and looked at June Moxie with arrogance. He spoke slowly and in a tone that June Moxie hated the most, June Sunshao, hee. You see? Won't you give me some face? It's only a misunderstanding. How about we turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk? Whoa! It's the Murong family. I'm scared to death, I'm scared to death. Oh fatty, hurry and save me. I'm so scared that I can't breathe. June Dashao jumped up in shock. He shouted exaggeratedly and patted his chest. He was so shocked that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Then, he suddenly put on a straight face. It was as if he was wearing a mask. Trying to scare me? You dare to use the Murong family to pressure me? TSK TSK TSK, TSK TSK TSK. June Moxie circled around Murong Qianli twice. He stretched his neck and grinned. He gritted his teeth. Ha! 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 Murong Qianli, you're very awesome. The Murong family is very famous. He. Do you know who this young master is? Jun Moxie didn't wait for Murong Qianli to speak. He then said in a strange tone, do you think that the Murong family is more awesome than my Jun family? He. You're so young, but you can represent the Murong family? Whoa! You're really awesome. It seems that the Murong family and the Meng family want to join hands in a rebellion. They want to overthrow my Tian Xiang. I understand. Jun Moxie nodded. I didn't say that I'm representing the Murong family. I didn't say anything about rebellion. Don't start a rumor here. Jun Moxie, you can use this trick on others. But, it won't work on me. Murong Qianli squinted his eyes and saw that his brothers were looking at him strangely. So, he hastily tried to explain himself. I can't represent the Murong family. Then, why did you jump out? Fuck. I'm such a failure as a human. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry wants to bully me. I don't have the slightest bit of fun in my life. Jun Moxie sighed. Then, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and glared at Murong Qianli. Since you can't represent the Murong family, then why did you come out and pretend to be a donkey? Why aren't you getting out of here? Look. Why don't you try looking at me again? Do you believe that I won't castrate you right now? You don't even need to leave the Imperial Palace to find a meal. Hurry up and get out of here. Fuck. Jun Sunshao's arrogant and despotic behavior finally aroused the anger of the crowd. The scholars and the young masters looked at him with disdain. They all started to criticize him. Jun Moxie stood with his hands on his hips. He didn't reject anyone. He stood in front of the Imperial Palace's main hall. Obscenities and vulgarities poured out in torrents. The vulgarities of the marketplace were endless. Their voices were getting louder and louder. Their spittle was getting more and more everywhere. But, they didn't back down. There's a poem that goes, even if he has thousands of soldiers and horses, I am still a pillar in the middle. There's another poem that goes, frowning and coldly facing thousands of people's fingers, I open my mouth and curse them all back. Fatty Tang looked at Jun Sunshao's tall and slim back with boundless adoration. He exclaimed in admiration, this eloquence. This reaction. This is really nimble and awesome. There's only one sentence that can describe it, a child who eats candy, choose it. The crowd's emotions were stirred up. The voices in front of the main hall were getting louder and louder. In fact, it seemed like a market was about to start a fight, impudent. This is the Imperial Palace. Who dares to make such a ruckus here? Don't you want your heads anymore? A dignified voice suddenly resounded. It sounded like the evening drum and morning bell. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear. The people who were quarreling looked up. They couldn't help but shout, heavens! The big shots of the imperial court and the elders of the various families were standing there with black faces. In fact, it seemed as if a layer of frost was hanging on their faces. What a scandal! Duge Zongheng shouted. It seemed as if he wished for the whole world to be in chaos. The youngsters all had sullen faces as they hung their heads. They hated Jun Moxie to the extreme. They had painstakingly built up their image. But, they had lost it because of this guy. They had fallen into the eyes of the big shots. Sigh. Chapter 281. Naturally, apart from a handful of people in front of the main hall, everyone else had participated in this war of words. As the saying goes, the law doesn't punish the masses. So, they had no choice but to let it go. Everyone returned to their original positions. Then, they discovered that Jun Sunshao had stood up while patting his buttocks. This guy had gotten tired of scolding for a long time, but he still knew how to sit down and continue scolding. What made people even more speechless was that this guy didn't want to abuse his buttocks even though he didn't have a stool to sit on. There was a pig's head lying under his buttocks, and it seemed as if he was on the verge of death. It was the Meng family's young master Meng Fei. The young master Jun had been sitting on his back a moment ago. No wonder he would twist his waist and turn his buttocks from time to time. So that's how it is. Looking at the young master Meng's appearance, it seems that he will be absent from this scholarly autumn banquet. Hurry up and bring him to the imperial physician. The Meng family's patriarch, Meng Shuisheng, shouted anxiously. Then, he turned to look at Jun Zhantian, and said with a fake smile, "Old Jun, your grandson is really young and promising, cough cough. Brother Meng is overpraising me. Mo-sia is young and ignorant. He doesn't deserve such high praise from Brother Meng. Don't spoil him." Grandpa Jun stroked his beard as he expressed his gratitude. Meng Shuisheng staggered and almost fell. Even the big shots next to him staggered as well. We finally understand. It turns out that shamelessness is also hereditary. The debauchee Jun had deliberately stirred up a farce in front of the main hall. The momentum was so intense, the sound was so loud, and the people involved were so many. So, the emperor and the civil and military officials in the main hall weren't deaf. So, they had naturally heard the commotion. It was also because they had heard that the commotion outside was getting more and more intense that they couldn't bear it any longer. So, they had hurriedly ended the discussion. Normally, the discussion would have lasted for at least 4 hours. But, it had ended in less than an hour. This was because the minds of the big shots were no longer here. The people who were arguing outside were the treasures of their families. Judging from the commotion, someone might really die if they went out a little later. Jun Dashao snickered in his heart, feeling very good. In my 2 lives, when have I ever waited for anyone except for those dead people? You guys actually dare to make me wait outside the hall. If I don't stir up some trouble, wouldn't it be too easy for you guys? At this point, there was still more than 2 hours before the start of the feast. However, there were already many eunuchs and palace maids who were busy taking care of the guests. This, third young master. Which hall are they in? Do you know that? Tang Yuan asked Jun Moxie. At the same time, he looked around with his small eyes. Why haven't I seen any of the legendary talented ladies? What's the point of having a bunch of genteel men who don't look like men? No matter what, you should at least have your eyes open first. It seems like you should ask His Majesty about this question. What's the use of asking me? Jun Moxie casually plucked a half-withered dog's tail grass from outside the jade railings. He held it in his mouth and flipped it up and down. The furry tip of the grass was flipping up and down in front of his mouth. It was extremely agile. Fatty Tang looked on enviously. There was too much fat on his big face. His lips were too thick and his tongue was thicker than normal people's. It was impossible for him to be as agile as Jun Moxie. He snorted and said, "If I dare to ask His Majesty, my grandfather will probably skin me immediately." It's fine if you say you don't know, but you actually want me to ask His Majesty. Why do you want to harm me? You are my big brother. Fuck, this is my first time coming to the palace. I came here right after you. You came earlier than me. If you don't know, how would I know? Don't call me big brother in front of everyone. Having a fat brother like you makes me dizzy. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. Then, he suddenly burst into laughter. Fatty, another group of men has arrived. They don't look like men at all. They are your old lovers. Aren't they the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute? You see, they are walking in an orderly manner. It's like a fucking military parade. What a bunch of hypocrites. Sure enough, there was a group of young men in white clothes on the smooth jade steps in front of the main hall. Each and every one of them had a graceful demeanor. They were elegant and at ease. Each of them had delicate features. Each of them had a noble and refined bearing. There were exactly 20 of them. They were led by 2 white-bearded old men in the front. They slowly entered the hall. The 2 old men in the front had thin facial features. Their white hair was fluttering in the wind. Their hair was tied up with a square scarf. They were wearing a loose robe with big sleeves. They were brimming with the air of a learned scholar. They were the two great teachers of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. They were also respected by the scholars of the whole nation, Mei Gao Jia and Kong Ling Yang. Fatty Tang snorted and said in a low voice, "It's those two old farts again with their disciples and grand-disciples. A whole family of hypocrites. Damn it, I feel like vomiting just looking at them. Later, I'll go and touch the most pretentious one. I just happen to be lacking a servant boy to wash my underwear. I did it to the last one, but now that I think about it, I'm starting to regret it." Jun Moxie lifted his chin slightly and looked at the group of people. He snorted twice, showing his approval of Fatty's words. He knew that Fatty was a bad person, and he even agreed with him. Coincidentally, someone behind him suddenly sighed with emotion. This is indeed the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. Sure enough, people who hide beautiful things in their chests are clean, and those who have the scholarly air in their bellies are elegant. The students of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute are indeed the cream of the crop of our Tianxiang Empire. He's really an idiot. Jun Imo Xia and Tang Yuan said in unison. Then, they snorted in disdain. Then, they raised their heads and tilted their heads to the side. Wherever one went, there would be people who would flatter the stinky feet of the rich. However, the main hall was filled with the rising stars of the major families. Moreover, there was no lack of people who had already been confirmed to be the successor of the family. So, they had to flatter a bunch of pedantic scholars who only knew how to read books. Even if they had the intention to recruit them, they would still find it somewhat disgusting. Although the two of them did not retreat slowly, the surroundings were silent. Their simultaneous voices could be considered loud and clear. In an instant, the gazes of all the people in front of the main hall fell on the two of them. For a moment, everyone's eyes were on them, and everyone's attention was focused on them. Especially the two old men from the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. They looked at Jun Moxie and Tang Yuan as if they were looking at two piles of dog dung. Their eyes were filled with disgust and disdain. Fatty Tang jumped in fright when he was suddenly looked down upon by so many powerful and insignificant people. His fat face changed color, and his body trembled. Fatty Tang was able to play with and cripple a few scholars in private. However, it was mostly because the scholar's character was unbearably despicable. He tried to curry favor with the rich and powerful, and that was why he was killed by Fatty Tang. Now that he was suddenly being stared at by so many powerful people, he couldn't say that he wasn't afraid. He couldn't believe that he wasn't afraid. Fatty was a little afraid. However, the debauchee Jun didn't seem to care. He simply raised his head high, and glanced down at the crowd. Jun Dashao was facing the disdain of nearly 100 people. However, he displayed a condescending and unyielding manner. His disdainful and arrogant demeanor made it seem as if he wasn't afraid of honor or disgrace. He was a scoundrel, and wasn't afraid of anyone. He may be strong, but I'm stronger than him. This was the Hitman Jun's motto. Rotten wood can't be carved. Mei Gao Jia coldly stared at the two debauches. Then, he raised his goat-like beard, and brushed his sleeves. He then scolded them in a disdainful tone. After all, he was an experienced scholar. So, he couldn't use any more despicable words. However, this sentence was the fiercest and most serious of curses. It's really fucking elegant. Old Man Mei didn't look sideways as he scolded the two debauches. Then, he led the students to the top of the stairs. He greeted the ministers of the court, and exchanged greetings with them. Then, he introduced the outstanding students to them one by one. However, Jun Moxie discovered that the two old men had glanced at Fatty as they walked past him. And, their gazes were filled with deep hatred. It must be said that these scholars, especially the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute, hated the most people in the entire Tianxiang kingdom. They didn't care about Jun Moxie at all. Instead, they hated the most, Fatty Tang, Tang Yuan. However, this wasn't surprising at all. Fatty Tang was a debauchee. He was despicable. Moreover, he had used his family's power to repeatedly frame a famous scholar who had graduated from the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. He had forced the scholar into a desperate situation. Then, he had jumped out and pretended to be a good person in order to win him over. It wouldn't have been a big deal if that was the case. But this evil Fatty Tang had made that scholar do nothing else. Instead, he had been forced to wash his woman's underwear at home every day. This was an extraordinary shame and humiliation. What was the place of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute for such an insult? What was the place of the thousands of scholars in Tianxiang? Fatty Tang hadn't kept this matter a secret. So, it had naturally spread like wildfire. Mei Gao Jia and Kong Ling Yang, the two elders, had almost vomited blood when they heard that their proud disciples had been humiliated in such a manner. And they had ended up in such a state. Since then, Fatty Tang's reputation had become even more resounding in the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute than among the debauches of Tianxiang City. As for that great scholar who had died in such an unjust manner, no one cared whether he was trying to curry favor with the rich and powerful, or whether he was blinded by greed. After all, our Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute was a talented and benevolent scholar. So, what if he had some utilitarian heart? But, who in this world doesn't have a utilitarian heart? Every man for himself, heaven and earth will destroy him. In any case, Fatty Tang, you're in the wrong for harming and humiliating people. This was the consensus of the students of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. It was estimated that the two scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute wouldn't be able to rest in peace if they couldn't humiliate Fatty. So, they wouldn't miss this opportunity since they had been presented with it. In another corner, a green-clothed young man stood quietly. His face was covered by a veil, and he did not pay any attention to what was happening in front of him. It was as if everything that was happening in front of him was nothing to him, not even worth mentioning. His eyes were clear and indifferent. But they were filled with warmth and gentleness. His face was covered with a veil. But everyone who saw him could feel the peerless elegance in his bones. This was the eldest grandson of the Grand Preceptor, young Master Li Yuan. Chapter 282. Erupt. 4th. A chubby eunuch appeared at the top of the stairs of the main hall. His face was downcast, and his face was filled with the dejection of a transvestite. Then, he called out in a strange, high-pitched voice, "The time has come. I invite all the lords, talented scholars, and young masters to proceed to the Cherishing Fragrance Palace, and await your audience." Blurg Jun Moxie retched. This sound is fucking ecstasy. It's even more unpleasant to hear than the ones on TV. There's nothing wrong with this. After all, TV dramas are imitations. So, how many eunuchs would actually go on stage to perform? However, this eunuch's crotch was the real deal. So, there was a lot more between his crotch and his crotch. The old men looked at each other, and came to a tacit understanding. The Cherishing Fragrance Palace was the largest palace in the Imperial Palace. It could accommodate more than 1,000 people at the same time. It seemed that the scale of this gifted scholar's feast had reached a certain level. Why couldn't they have notified us a few days earlier? Many outstanding disciples are outside, and can't make it back in time. Jun Dashao and the others were about to leave when they heard the eunuch's sharp voice. His Majesty has decreed that the brave and loyal Marquis Tang Wanli and his grandson Tang Yuan have an audience. Tang Yuan was startled. He looked at Jun Imo Xia with a bitter expression. "What's going on?" Jun Imo Xia rolled his eyes. He turned around and ignored Tang Yuan. "Do you think I'm an immortal? You're asking me everything." The debauchee Jun tilted his head, shrugged his shoulders, and swayed his buttocks as he strode towards the Cherishing Fragrance Palace like a cat. Everyone cast sidelong glances at him. Jun Zhantian stood on the stairs, and looked at his incomparably flashy and flirtatious grandson. He felt a headache coming on. "This old man told you to hide your incompetence, but I didn't tell you to hide like this, right? This is like a crane in a flock of chickens. It's like a crane in a flock of cranes. I'm done for, I'm done for." My reputation is going to be ruined because of your but. Old man Duga Woody came over with his hairy face, his eyes still fixed on June Moxie's swaying buttocks. He clicked his tongue and said, "Old June, this is the first time I've seen this kid since your grandson grew up, right?" Sure enough, hearing one's reputation was not as good as meeting one in person, and meeting one in person was even better than hearing one's reputation. Amazing, he was really different from the masses, and pretentious. Ha ha ha. Although he was saying New Year's greetings, his tone was very strange. June Jean Tian snorted and frowned. Then, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Old Dugu, I seem to recall that your Dugu family owes our June family 90 million taels of silver. And, you still act as if nothing has happened? Give me a straightforward answer." Grandpa June had always been firm with age. Moreover, he had been at loggerheads with old man Dugu for his entire life. So, how could he allow himself to be ridiculed in such a manner? Now that he had a handle on him, he saw that this ignorant old man had come to ridicule him. How could Grandpa June be so easily provoked? He had opened his mouth to force the debt. Duga Zongheng was stunned for a moment. His eyes were wide open, and he was speechless. After a long while, he fiercely spat and said, "Fu *k. Why don't you just kill me? 90 million taels of silver. Damn it. Do you think that my Duga residence is the national treasury? Even the national treasury can't take out that much right now. Then, are you planning to renege on the debt?" Grandpa June glared at him. "This is something that your Duga family has personally admitted to. You will compensate us according to the auction price of those wines." "What? Are you going back on your word now? I'm telling you, this is not a small amount of money. Our June family has lost a lot of chicken feathers and duck blood in order to add to this debt. Even if a lawsuit is brought before the emperor, your Duga family can forget about reneging on this debt. There is still justice in this world. Duga Zongheng, you must know that the heavens are watching everything that happens in this world." Duga Zongheng's anger was stifled. His words were full of sarcasm. One Buddha was born, 2 Buddhas ascended to heaven, 3 Buddhas underwent nirvana, and 4 Buddhas passed away. Although he was rude and unreasonable, he wasn't someone who would renege on a debt. Besides, the entire Tianxiang city was aware of this matter. Even if he wanted to renege on this debt, he wouldn't be able to do so. But, this debt can't be settled like this, and the words can't be said like this. How can the June family complain about this? What kind of argument is this? Panting heavily, he cursed his son a few hundred times in his heart. "Look at you, you wastrel, it's all because of your wastrel son that this old man got into trouble for. Let's see if you can repay this debt in your lifetime." Thinking of this, he suddenly rolled his eyes and came up with a plan. "That's right. Our Duga family owes your June family money. This old man is very clear about gratitude and grudges. A life for a life. A debt must be repaid with money. This is a matter of justice. Do you think that this old man is so despicable? Do you think that I would renege on a trifling few million taels of silver? Do you really think that everyone is like you? Do you really care about that small amount of money? June Jean Tian, do you think you can carry that much money into your coffin? I look down on your June family for being such a miser." June Jean Tian was almost angered to death. This old man was speaking too lightly. A trifling few million. That amount of money was equivalent to 3 years of military expenses for the Tianxiang Empire. So, he simply refused to let it go. "Since you don't care, then hurry up and return it to me. Why are you dragging this small amount of money? I'm telling you, my June family is still waiting for this small amount of money to eat. What's wrong with being a miser? It's better than someone reneging on a debt. When did I say that I won't return it?" Duga Zongheng rolled his eyes. "We admit that we have this debt. But, this old man's hands aren't very well off at the moment. So, naturally, I'm not in a hurry to pay it back. Especially, I didn't say when I would pay it back. Don't you think so? If I can't pay it back this year, won't there be next year and the year after? even if I can't pay it back in this lifetime, won't there be a next lifetime? Don't you remember a certain duke saying that there will be an infinite number of descendants, but the debt won't increase? So, how can I not pay it back? Ha ha ha. A burst of crazy laughter erupted from the side. Someone had been paying attention ever since the two old men had gathered together and muttered to each other. Then, a group of white-haired heads came over when the two of them talked about that huge debt. These were the old men of the various families. Each of them had a face full of gossip. They wanted to see Dugu Zonghang make a fool of himself. And, the group of old men roared with laughter when they heard Dugu Zonghang come up with such an extremely shameless and classic phrase. This old man is too talented. It's only a debt, but he's pushing it to the next lifetime. And, he's saying that there will be an infinite number of descendants. This is too shameless. This is a new peak of shamelessness. If a tree doesn't care about its bark, then it will die. If a man doesn't care about his face, then he's invincible. Today, I've learned something new, your mother's fart. Jun Zhan Tianheng became anxious. Who will follow you to the next lifetime? You're too shameless. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and said, Dugu, this matter can be accommodated. If you don't have the money to pay it back, you can use your granddaughter to pay off the debt. As long as you give your granddaughter to this old man's grandson as a daughter-in-law, our two families will become in-laws. If that's the case, how can this old man argue with the in-laws about this amount of money? This debt will naturally be forgiven. How about it? Let me tell you, you're getting a big bargain. 90 million taels of silver. If you convert it into gold, it'll be 900,000 taels. That's enough to cast 1,000 people of the same size. How about it? Your mother's fart. You wretched old devil June. Dugu Zongheng became anxious. He opened his mouth and cursed, my granddaughter is like a fairy. Look at your unlucky grandson. Look at him, he pointed his finger at the back of the June debauchee as he said this. He then angrily said, this brat is worthy of my granddaughter. Why don't you tell me if the two of them are a good match? Your words are reasonable. I also know that your granddaughter is not worthy of my grandson. But to tell you the truth, my grandson wants your granddaughter. This is your granddaughter's great fortune. Grandpa June narrowed his eyes, old Dugu, if you don't agree now, then you'll regret it when the rice is cooked. Don't blame this old man for not reminding you when that time comes. He dares. This old man will castrate him. Dugu Zongheng was furious. He was so angry that he wanted to rush forward and start a fight. Why would Grandpa June care about him? He quickly got into a fighting stance. The elders saw that the situation wasn't right. These two old men were about to start a fight. They hurriedly stopped the two of them in groups of 3 or 5, and only then did they avoid a shocking farce. If the two old men of the two families and the two big shots of the military were to start a fight in the imperial palace, then it would be very lively. The two old men struggled with all their might. They looked at each other as if they wanted to eat each other alive. They punched and kicked, but it was all in vain. Jun Zhan Tian, look after your grandson. If he provokes this old man, I'll pull out his penis and feed it to the birds. At that time, your Jun family will truly have no descendants. Dugu Zongheng's saliva splattered in all directions as he clamored. Bah! You think that you have the ability to do that? Do you think that this old man is afraid of you because I've been cultivating myself for the past few years? I forgot to teach you a lesson all these years. You've grown wings and want to soar into the sky. Today, this old man will make an exception and teach you a lesson. You don't know how to appreciate favors. Grandpa June was also furious. Damn it! This old man is pitying your granddaughter's infatuation. Otherwise, with my grandson's qualifications, even the emperor's princess wouldn't be worthy. Let alone your granddaughter. To think that there are such shameless people in this world, apart from the few old men who were doing their best to hold them back, the other civil and military officials hurriedly passed by. These two old things weren't people that anyone could afford to offend. Dugu Zongheng wasn't too unreasonable, but at least his life wasn't in danger. However, that old thing of the June family usually looked harmless on the surface, and even boasted that he was cultivating his moral character. But the last time he killed a third of the imperial court's ministers, he was a classic example of a silent executioner who kills without batting an eyelid. Now that these two were in a dispute, this was a troublesome place. So, they couldn't stay here for long, Tang Yuan. The gentle emperor looked at the big fatty in front of him in the Tian de Palace Hall. He had a calm temperament. But, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This grandson of his, Tang Wanli's, was too oppressive. He hadn't felt anything that day in the aristocratic hall when he was far away. But, he suddenly felt that his fat body was extremely plump. It gave him a sense of security. Tang Yuan's body had fully manifested the superiority of the empire's economic system. When he saw Tang Yuan, he immediately felt the blissful feeling of a commoner who didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Yes. Tang Yuan pays his respects to His Majesty. Tang Yuan knelt on the ground with great difficulty. His belly spread out in front of him like a carpet. He wanted to kowtow, but he ended up knocking his own belly. Chapter 283. Tang Yuan was a little scared. His grandfather had sent him to the door, and then went back. So, he was left alone to face the emperor. He was feeling a little apprehensive. Stand up. Servants, give him a seat. His Majesty couldn't help but chuckle when he saw his embarrassed appearance. He then waved his hand in a friendly manner. Yes, thank you, Your Majesty. Tang Yuan propped himself up with his chubby hands, wiped his sweat and carefully sat down. But the eunuch had brought a small armchair. He didn't know whether it was intentional or not. Of course, an average person with a normal stature would be able to easily sit inside. In fact, they might even be quite wealthy. However, Fatty Tang was barely able to sit inside. Fatty Tang kept in mind his grandfather's teachings. If he were to be given a seat in front of His Majesty, he mustn't sit in an ostentatious manner. Only half of his buttocks should be enough. But now, Fatty Tang wanted to sit in half of his buttocks. But the problem was that this armchair couldn't even fit half of his buttocks. This thing was too small. No wonder other people could only sit in half of their buttocks. He finally managed to squeeze half of his buttocks into the armchair. The armchair was full, and his fat was overflowing. Ha ha. The emperor couldn't help but laugh out loud. Tang Yuan laughed hollowly. He could feel sweat seeping out of his forehead. Tang Yuan, I heard that you're the manager of the aristocratic hall. The emperor stopped laughing, and asked in a seemingly unintentional manner. In the depths of his eyes, a cold light silently flashed. Yes. Your Majesty, this humble subject. Fatty Tang was sweating profusely. He stammered, but couldn't speak. He wanted to call himself a little official, but then he thought that it was not appropriate. He did not have an official position. He wanted to call himself a commoner, but he was not one. He wanted to call himself a, but that was the tone of the martial world. If he called himself I, it would be too disrespectful. He choked for a moment. It's fine. Just do whatever you want. The emperor spoke in a gentle manner. Tang Yuan, can you tell me who came up with such a good idea during the aristocratic hall's auction? This, that. Your Majesty, it's like this. Fatty suddenly thought of something. Fuck, no wonder Big Boss kept reminding me so solemnly. It turns out that it's actually this Big Boss. You should know, Big Boss is really smart. Actually, back then, it was because I, was relatively young and ignorant. I made a mistake and was kicked out of the house by my grandfather. At that time, I was thinking that I must do something to show the old man that his decision to kick me out of the family was wrong. Tang Yuan scratched his head in embarrassment. But I don't know anything. I'm just interested in making money. You're saying, this idea was actually your idea? His Majesty the Emperor's expression darkened. Suddenly, a heavy pressure pressed down on Tang Yuan without a word. This was not the aura of a Xian Qi expert, but the pure might of an emperor. Even Jun Imo Xia or the 8 great masters wouldn't be able to imitate such a thing. Yes. Your Majesty, this isn't a big deal. It's just a small business, that's all. Tang Yuan's clothes were drenched in sweat. He felt as if his entire body was burning up. However, he was able to endure it with his red lips and white teeth. The emperor stared at him, and didn't speak for a long time. He gently tapped his fingers on the dragon throne, and issued a crisp, dong-dong sound. This sound was exceptionally clear in the silence of the great hall. Tang Yuan felt as if each tap was on his heart. His heart started to beat like a drum. He felt his entire body break out in cold sweat, and his body went limp. Hold on, I must hold on, nothing. Just a small business. Tang Yuan, do you know your crime? His Majesty narrowed his eyes, leaving only a small gap. He observed Fatty Tang's complexion. This little one is guilty. I don't know where this little one has made a mistake, please enlighten me. Tang Yuan became even more nervous. He didn't know how to address himself. Suddenly, he remembered that he had visited a brothel. He thought about it for a moment, and felt that it was appropriate to use it in this situation. So, he said it out loud. However, in his panic, he only knew how to copy the original version. He even called himself Great Master. His tone was even better. When a brothel servant spoke to a customer, he would rush to admit that he was wrong, regardless of whether he was wrong or not. His attitude was very good. Now, Fatty had become a big teapot and a pimp. And His Majesty had become a customer in a muddle-headed manner. How are you guilty? Your auction has turned the entire capital city into a mess. The emperor snorted and continued to exert pressure on the crowd. His Majesty was an honorable person. How would he know that he had somehow become a great master? This lowly one didn't think too much at that time. I just wanted to earn some money from you. Cough, cough. I just wanted to earn some money from you. That's all. This lowly one definitely didn't force you to buy or sell. It was absolutely consensual. Tang Yuan's sweat dripped down in a straight line. Gentlemen, the moment these words came out, the emperor instantly became one of the common patrons of the brothel. Furthermore, among these patrons, there were 3 of his own sons. As for the fatty, he was muddle-headed and naturally did not know that he had brought the relationship between the 4 of them a step closer. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the word nobility that you mentioned has already provoked the desire of the rich in the capital to compete with each other. This has become increasingly serious. In recent days, the prices of goods in the capital have been rising rapidly. Because you have only sent one invitation to each industry, but clearly stated that only those who receive the invitation are nobles. This has greatly provoked internal disputes within the industry, and led to personal grievances. Now, the salt merchants, cloth merchants, all industries in Fragrant Sky City are fighting openly and covertly. There have even been a few cases of bloodshed. Third, you have also provoked political instability. His Majesty naturally couldn't say the last point clearly. But, just mentioning it had already scared Tang Yuan quite a bit. It turns out that boss has such a great plan and a backup plan. This is really my idol. And here I thought it was only for money. I'm so stupid. My level is still not high enough. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shown my face in public, and charged into the enemy lines while boss sat quietly in the back. This is what it means to be a real strategist, that's 1,000 miles away. His Majesty saw the perplexed look on Tang Yuan's face, and was even more certain that this matter wasn't his idea. At least, it wasn't his mastermind. He slowly stood up from his throne, and leisurely took 2 steps forward. Then, he stood 3 feet in front of Tang Yuan with his hands clasped behind his back. Tang Yuan, you are the grandson of the brave and loyal Marquis. Even if you are a debauchee, and even if you are ignorant and incompetent, you will still be able to enjoy a life of glory and splendor in the future. Why do you want to stand up for others, and ruin the bright future of your Tang family? Do you think that this is worth it? A psychological attack. It was a blatant psychological attack. No descendant of any family would be able to remain calm in the face of such a threat. His Majesty the Emperor was certain of this. Therefore, his eyes were fixed on Tang Yuan's face as soon as he had spoken these words. However, the Emperor couldn't have imagined that Jun Imo Xie had already rehearsed this speech several times in front of Fatty Tang. Jun Imo Xie didn't have the aura of an emperor, but his murderous aura was superior. A mere aura of an emperor couldn't do anything to Fatty. In fact, Fatty Tang's temperament wouldn't have been able to deal with the old fox's tricks if the Emperor had only been making small talk. Sooner or later, he would have given himself away. And, Fatty wouldn't have been able to withstand it even if he had been prepared. However, there were still nearly 1,000 people waiting in the aromatic palace. Therefore, the Emperor had turned to this direction in order to end the fight quickly. And, he had fallen right into Jun Imo Xie's trap. For Tang Yuan, this problem could be compared to the following: a high school student, who was at the bottom of the class and basically didn't know anything, was given a set of test papers on the eve of the college entrance examination, and was forced to memorize them. Only on the day of the college entrance examination did he discover that it was actually the college entrance examination questions, and it was a complete set. Eldest brother is very clever. Tang Yuan's heart was filled with admiration. Take this. Your Majesty, you may not know this, but this lowly one will tell you everything. This lowly one was chased out of the house by my family's ancestor, and this lowly one deserved it. There's nothing much to say, but at that time, this lowly one was beaten black and blue by the family's laws. I couldn't even move, and was even forced out of the house. I didn't bring any money with me. At that time, my good brother, the Jun family's third young master, Jun Imo Xie, appeared. It was he who saved me from danger, rescued me from my predicament, and brought me back to the Jun family to recuperate. This kindness. Fatty's face was full of emotions, and his face was full of emotion. You mean to say that this idea came from the Jun family's third young master? His Majesty was a little angry. This Fatty is talking nonsense. Why is he so annoying? Your Majesty, you've misunderstood. Please listen to what I have to say. That day when I entered the Jun family, my good brother treated me with great hospitality. His clothing, food, lodging, and transportation were all meticulously taken care of. Tang Yuan may be a debauchee, but he doesn't have any strong points. But, he knows how to repay kindness. But, he's living under someone else's roof. So, how can he talk about repayment? I think that I'm only a little bit better than others in terms of business. So, I suddenly had a flash of inspiration. What do you two have in common? Debauchee? Prodigal? Disappointing? What else? Your Majesty must know that the rumors in the marketplace say that Brother Jun and I are the number 1 and number 2 debauchee of Tianxiang City. This lowly one found a glimmer of inspiration. I recalled the illustrious years of the past. I didn't know the value of money. So, I recklessly squandered it. And, I would recklessly compete with people for worthless things. And, I would spend a lot of money in one go. Moreover, there are many people like me and third young master in the capital. So, it would be appropriate to call them aristocrats. So, how can we be debauchous if we aren't aristocrats? This can be regarded as a way to make money. In any case, these people don't take money seriously. It's quite a coincidence that this lowly one got to know the world's number 1 wine expert, Song Shang. And, I got his approval. And, the aristocratic hall got his secret wine. And, these coincidences have led to today's situation. If your Majesty has any questions, then, Tang Yuan is willing to answer them one by one. Fatty spoke in one breath. He didn't know whether it was because he had spoken smoothly, or because the Emperor's attitude had already been predicted by the young Master Jun. However, Fatty wasn't as scared as he had been before. So, how could the Emperor be willing to let go of this matter so easily? So, he asked every question in detail. Fatty already had a plan in his mind. So, he didn't panic in the slightest. Instead, he answered the questions fluently. Every reason he gave was reasonable and impeccable. Fatty talked about the heartache of being expelled from his family. So, he passionately acted in accordance with director Jun's brilliant script. Then, he started to bawl and weep. A pile of fat, sweaty, and tearful whales in front of me, what kind of feeling is this? Chapter 284. The Emperor sighed. It seemed that this fatty wasn't going to get anything out of him today. But his answers were a little too smooth, weren't they? Tired, the Emperor went back to his throne and frowned as he pondered. He got up from his seat and stood in front of Fatty Tang with his hands behind his back. He was going to use this dignified hall as much as he could to exert his authority and pressure Fatty further. He had succeeded in doing this, but of all the things he shouldn't have done, the first thing he asked was Jun Moxie's usual question. That way, Fatty's admiration for Boss Jun had been aroused, and the two cancelled each other out. This made the pressure less effective, I understand. You may leave now. His Majesty seemed a little tired as he rubbed his forehead with one hand and waved his other hand outwards. Relieved, Fatty Tang felt as if he had just been granted amnesty. Heavens! Earth! I've finally made it through. He was about to stand up to express his gratitude when all of a sudden, the Emperor looked up and his piercing gaze pierced right into Tang Yuan's eyes like two sharp arrows. Word by word, the Emperor went straight to the point. Jun Wui was the one who came up with this idea, right? Just as Tang Yuan was about to stand up, he relaxed his mind, only to feel as though his entire body had lost all strength. He suddenly heard the Emperor's question, and upon hearing the word Jun, he immediately panicked. Unable to clearly hear what the Emperor had said, he was left dumbfounded, his mouth wide open as he subconsciously exclaimed, "Ah!" The Emperor looked at Tang Yuan and smiled. Isn't that the case? The debauchee Jun took 2 steps forward, and waved his hand as he called out, "Hey, that masked brat." He was calling out to Li Yuran. Li Yuran stopped and stood there quietly, waiting for Jun Moxie to arrive. The young masters around him wanted to stay with him, but Li Yuran waved them off. She didn't say a word, but her intention was clear. She made her intentions clear in a calm manner, but the people behind her didn't object. They all left one after another. This was an indescribable dignity. Jun Mo Xia could see that Li Yuran was acting pretentiously. But, he was able to act like Li Yuran. In fact, he had even convinced himself that he was acting pretentiously. So, this was a kind of realm. Li Yuran had one hand behind his back. Every single movement of his seemed to be made by the heavens, and it was natural and unrestrained. It naturally gave others a feeling of elegance and transcendence from the mortal world. He looked at Jun Moxie with a complicated look in his eyes. There was calmness, fighting spirit, and fear, but it was all gone in a flash. I don't know what advice Jun Sunshao has for me. Li Yuran's attitude was neither intimate nor distant. But his voice was clear and bright. It was neither loud nor soft. It made people who heard it feel indescribably comfortable. Your attitude isn't bad. You have a good upbringing. This young master is here to give you advice, Jun Moxie said casually. Please speak. Li Yuran's eyes revealed a smile like spring water. He said in a soft voice, "It's an honor to listen to Jun Sunshao's teachings. I'm all ears. I just want to ask you. Are you tired of wearing this veil all day? Is it hot? Is it because you want to show off? Or is it because you're shameless? Are you trying to take liberties with innocent women?" Jun Moxie squinted at him and opened his mouth to provoke him. Or, are you disfigured? Li Yuran usually didn't show his face. Jun Moxie was very curious about this guy. He was only a few years older than him, but he had a frightening reputation. In some ways, he was even afraid of him. There was no other reason. This man was too hypocritical. His schemes were too deep. His shrewdness was frightening. It seemed that he was always scheming against people. But on the surface, he was always indifferent, modest, and honest. Jun Moxie had always been afraid of such a smiling tiger. Who knew when he would scheme against me? Hitman Jun was never afraid of villains. He wasn't afraid of madmen. He wasn't afraid of heroes. He wasn't afraid of gentlemen. He wasn't afraid of villains. But what he feared the most, and what he hated the most, was a hypocrite. Li Yuran's level of hypocrisy had already reached the pinnacle of perfection, and had reached the pinnacle of hypocrisy. Meng Fei, whom Jun Moxie had just taught a lesson to, and those who had cursed at him, were basically Li Yuran's underlings. But Li Yuran didn't react. Instead, he was observing him. He was examining himself. Moreover, there was a hint of fear in his eyes. Could it be that Li Yuran is on guard against me? Or has he discovered something? Therefore, Jun Moxie made a prompt decision. He chose to make the first move. He wanted to probe this guy's attitude towards him. He wanted to know how to deal with him in the future. Third young master has guessed correctly. My face is disfigured. Li Yuran's eyes flashed with pain. She didn't take Jun Moxie's words seriously. Her tone was still flat. It seemed that she was being cautious. It seemed that Jun Moxie wasn't worthy of her anger. Take off that rag and let me have a look. Jun Moxie looked at the veil with great interest. Then, he frivolously ordered, I haven't seen what a disfigured face looks like. I've heard that you used to be a pretty boy. What a pity. There was another reason in Jun Moxie's mind. He remembered that Li Yuran had spared no effort in pursuing Princess Raimu. And, it was clear from the way Li Yuran had looked at Princess Raimu at the aristocratic hall that Li Yuran was deeply in love with Princess Raimu. And, this couldn't be faked. But, such a man hadn't hesitated to put his beloved woman to death in front of his own interests. In fact, he hadn't cared about her at all. In fact, he was the one who had arranged this trap. Jun Dashao wouldn't forget that Lei Jianhong and the others were Li Yuran's senior brothers. And, they were the ones who had dealt with Princess Raimu. And, it was obvious that Li Yuran had incited them to do so. And, their purpose was to find out that he had disguised himself as the Tianxian Peak expert throwing knife. He had only vaguely felt that the existence of that mysterious person might be a threat to him. So, he hadn't hesitated to sacrifice his beloved woman in exchange for this information. It was just information, nothing more. Love wasn't fake. But, he could abandon it at any time. It was like throwing away a pair of worn-out shoes. Jun Moxie felt that such a person couldn't even be called a human. He could only be called a scum and a pervert. But, he looked graceful, elegant, and flawless on the surface. And, this made Jun Moxie even more unhappy in his heart. Can't you be as blatant as me and be the bad guy? What's the point of playing tricks? That's why I must tear off your mask. I'll expose your true colors. This was the first face-to-face confrontation between these two young talents. One had the air of a hoodlum, and the other had a graceful bearing. Both of them were wearing masks. But, it was hard to tell who would be the first to unveil the other's mask. This is another contest. It's only natural that I don't look good when I'm disfigured. Li Yuran looked at him calmly. She smiled faintly and said, but Jun Sunshao can go home and look in the mirror if he's willing to cut his beautiful face with a knife. Really? Jun Moxie dragged out his words. He cast a sidelong glance at him. Young Master Li is very experienced. But, this young master wants to see it. But, I want to know how it feels to have such a good-looking pretty boy suddenly disfigured. Isn't it exciting? Li Yuran's temperament was aroused by Jun Moxie's repeated provocations. Her smile turned cold, and her eyes turned cold. She said, it's indeed very exciting. It's a very refreshing feeling. If Jun Sunshao can't bear to do it, I can help him. I'll make third young master feel like dying. Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie laughed. He patted Li Yuran's shoulder and said loudly, so, young Master Yuran is also a kindred spirit. I didn't know about it before, and I've missed out on many good things. Brother Yuran is really good. You've seen through my thoughts with just a few words. You've reminded me of the beautiful times I spent in the Spirit Fog Lake. Haha, since we're all bosom friends of the Flower Kingdom, I wonder when Brother Yuran will teach me a few tricks. Even those who had walked far away turned their heads to look at them. Someone had openly discussed about visiting prostitutes with Li Yuran, the #1 scholar of the Tianxiang city. This was big news. Moreover, it seemed that Li Yuran was an experienced playboy. Even the #1 debauchee of Tianxiang city, Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao, had to bow down to him. This was very unexpected. Li Yuran's eyes flashed with anger. Then, he looked at Jun Moxie and said in a leisurely manner, "This foolish brother is a few years older than you in this regard. But, how can I be compared with third young master in this regard? Jun Sunshao isn't only good in this regard. But, he's also very outstanding in other aspects." "Oh? So, I'm so awesome. Tell me about it. I am a person who loves to be praised." Jun Moxie shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile. For example, Jun Sunshao helped Tang Yuan win back his wife with his matchless gambling skills. That was truly amazing. Li Yuran lowered his head and looked at his shoes. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he said those words. It seemed as if he had made up his mind about something. "Oh? That's right. That's right. The god of luck is following me. This is something that can't be helped." Jun Moxie looked at him with a look of interest. For example, third young master and Tang Yuan beat up Qin Xiaobao at noon. Just one night later, the entire northern city clan was annihilated. Li Yuran smiled as he strolled forward. His eyes did not seem to be looking at Jun Moxie. However, Jun Moxie's divine sense told him that this guy was closely watching his every reaction. That is because the Northern City clan has committed many evils. God wants to punish them. Besides, I don't even put those small fries in my eyes. How could they be worthy of being mentioned by young Master Yuran? Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows and said, "It seems that the relationship between young Master Yuran and the Northern City clan is not shallow." Li Yuran smiled faintly and said, "For example, Jun Sunshao was at the magnificent jewel hall and had Li Zhen spend a lot of money to buy the extremely precious jade coral." Chapter 285. Another example is that while Jun Sunshao was recuperating at home, the heroes of the Dugu family rushed forward. I remember that Jun Sunshao used to stay as far away from the 7 of them as possible. But this time, he took them down in one fell swoop. Then, he made a bet with Lord Wudi, and made the Dugu family owe the Jun family 90 million silver taels of debt through the aristocratic hall's auction. I heard that one of the 8 great masters, Solitary Eagle, has mysteriously stayed at the Jun family. Jun Sunshao, do you want me to continue? Li Yuran looked at him tenderly and said in a soft voice, "I don't understand. Why is your shadow in everything? You're really a mysterious and unfathomable person." A cold light flashed in Jun Moxie's eyes. He laughed mischievously and said, "Actually, I'm also very curious. Young Master Yuran's shadow seems to be everywhere. It's really extraordinary. From the Jianghu to the Imperial Court, from the first grade to the great masters. Young Master Yuran, your disfigured face seems to be everywhere. Even if you don't care about it, aren't you afraid of scaring the children? Even if you can't scare the children, it's not good to scare the flowers and plants." Li Yuran's eyes flickered, and a faint sharpness flashed in them. Then, he returned to his usual elegant and gentle demeanor. He seemed very embarrassed as he said in a soft voice, "Third young master, your surname is Jun." "Nonsense. I'm a descendant of the Jun family. Don't tell me that young Master Yuran's surname isn't Li." Jun Moxie snorted. "Same here." Li Yuran's eyes became distant and profound. He took a deep breath and said, "Third young master, I've always looked down on you. But ever since the jade coral exploded, Li Yuan suddenly raised his head and looked straight into Jun Moxie's eyes. Third young master, don't treat everyone as fools. There are many smart people in this world. You're certainly smart, but others aren't either. Is that so? Young Master Yuan must be one of these others, right? Jun Moxie laughed savagely and squinted at him. If you hadn't ruined Rong Jing at home, would you have thought of it? Hearing him mention disfigurement again, Li Yuan's eyes flashed a trace of bitterness. Soon after, he smiled in a carefree manner. His eyes were gentle, and even had a tinge of devilish color. He smiled and said, "Indeed, the explosion of the jade coral made me think a lot and understand a lot of things. Although I wasn't sure before, many people who I didn't pay attention to before have entered my eyes. And many people who were originally in my eyes have drifted away. It turns out that everything may not be under my control. But this is even more interesting. So, I should be grateful for that explosion." Li Yuan took a leisurely step forward and said slowly, "Jun Sunshao, what do you think?" Jun Mo Xia laughed and said, "This can be considered as turning misfortune into blessing, a blessing in disguise, right?" "You're right. Indeed, that's what I meant." Li Yuan nodded seriously. Then, she looked at Jun Moxie and said, "But, I never doubted you. I didn't believe that a debauchee could scheme against me. It wasn't until the aristocratic hall's auction that I realized that Jun Moxie can't be underestimated. It can't be. Don't tell me that there was a loophole in the auction." Jun Moxie had thought that there was a problem in this aspect. This was one of the reasons why he had tested Li Yuan today. Of course there was a loophole. Moreover, the loophole wasn't small. Li Yuan stood still. The two of them had already reached the entrance of the hall. Everyone else had already gone in. But, Li Yuan wanted to finish her words outside. Tang Yuan, a man who can lose his wife unexpectedly, came up with such a brilliant idea. He quietly stirred up a storm in the capital and caused chaos in the capital. Third young master, don't you think it's strange? Tang Yuan, does he have the qualifications? In other words, is he qualified? So, that's how it is. Jun Moxie had finally understood that there were no loopholes in the matter. But, there were loopholes in people. However, you, Li Yuan, have underestimated the people of the world. Fatty's conduct was indeed unbearable. But, I've given the general direction for this auction. But, I've managed to arrange 60 to 70% of the arrangements. Fatty's talent in business is very commendable. But, Jun Dashao certainly wouldn't let Li Yuan know about this. The more chaotic the capital gets, the better. The more chaotic the capital gets, the safer the Li family, the Jun family, the Duga family, and the other aristocratic families will be. The lives and deaths of other people will improve the safety of the aristocratic families at this moment. So, we'll have time to take a breather. Li Yuan smiled. Our Li family will also benefit from this auction. But, the benefits won't be that great. Then, shouldn't you be thanking me? Jun Moxie put on the appearance of a benefactor. He looked at Li Yuan. I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape if the third young master wants to kill me. Li Yuan didn't pay attention to his words. She continued to speak, but, it's not impossible for me to kill the third young master. My master is here. Your Jun family also has a solitary eagle. Li Yuan smiled gently. There's a balance between us. Our Li family belongs to the government, and the Duga family belongs to the military. But, I don't dare to break this balance for the time being. And, I believe that you don't want to break it either. But as long as one of us dies, the balance will be gone. What do you say, third young master? Li Yuan smiled confidently. Young Master Yuan has great foresight. You're right. The world is very balanced and harmonious. Jun Moxie smiled. But, he was secretly determined in his heart. This balance can't be broken for the time being. But when the time comes, I don't mind touching your head in the dark. It's not that difficult for me to do that either. I can't imagine what the third young master will do. But, Li Yuan, won't go overboard for the time being. Li Yuan smiled, I won't dare to go overboard for the time being. But the third young master will be the first opponent that I must get rid of if certain conditions are met. Li Yuan's words were very serious and solemn. Rather than saying it was a polite remark, it would be better to say that it was a promise. Given Li Yuan's character, these words could already be said to be very open and honest, and very magnanimous. I believe you. The corners of Jun Moxie's mouth crooked. He added 2 words in his heart. It'll be strange. If Li Yuan had the opportunity to get rid of him without anyone suspecting him, Jun Moxie didn't doubt that he would kill him without any hesitation. It would be the same if he were in Li Yuan's shoes. But the current situation was just as Li Yuan had said. The two of them were the Li family's and the Jun family's biggest hope. This balance couldn't be broken. Otherwise, Li Yuan would have died in the hands of Jun Moxie. And Jun Moxie wouldn't be in the mood to chat with him. So, we might as well have some fun. Li Yuan didn't know whether she believed Jun Moxie or not. The corners of her mouth slightly crooked. She smiled and said, with the third young master's current ability, he wasn't as relaxed as you ran in the past few years. Speaking of which, the two of us can be said to be in the same boat. We're both pitiful people who didn't have a childhood. So, we've never had fun. So, we might as well make up for it. Don't you think we can have a playmate? Li Yuan seemed to be very interested in this question. Jun Moxie coughed. He thought, I may not have had a childhood like you. But, Jun Moxie's childhood was much more colorful than yours. Do you want to play with murder? Or do you want to play with arson? Jun Moxie smiled mischievously. Murder and arson can be considered a kind of fun. Li Yuan tilted her head and thought for a moment. She seemed to be looking forward to it. But, we've already played. Then, the two of them stepped into the Hall of Cherishing Fragrance. The moment they entered the door, Li Yuan said in a low voice, there are very few people in the younger generation who can play with me like this. Moreover, they've repeatedly made me suffer losses. They're very interesting playmates. We might as well continue to play. His eyes were looking at the ground when he said this. His voice was also very low. It seemed as if he was talking to himself. Continue to play. Jun Moxie suddenly burst into laughter. He looked at the hundreds of people who had already arrived in the Hall of Cherishing Fragrance. Then, he shouted in an incomparably vulgar manner, then, let's continue to play. Oh. I'll play with you guys. Everyone sneered in unison. Then, there were the sounds of coquettish pouting and low laughter. It turned out that the site of the Great Hall had become the country of cherishing fragrance. All the beauties and talented women had gathered together in the hall. A fragrant wind had lingered in the air. And, Jun Moxie clearly felt that there were 2 pairs of eyes that were as bright as autumn waters. They were calmly gazing at him. Li Yuan heard Jun Moxie's roguish tone. She couldn't help but silently smile. A bright light flashed in her eyes. There were hundreds of people in the Great Hall. But, Li Yuan knew that Jun Moxie's words were meant for her alone. The two of them separated, and didn't look at each other again. Both of them had their own cards up their sleeves. And, they had also seen through each other's cards. But, their hearts had become much heavier than before. Opponent. These 2 words appeared in their minds at the same time. Jun Dashao finally reined in his thoughts. Hypocrite Li was the only opponent of the same level as him. But, he couldn't put all his thoughts on him alone. After all, there were other things to do in this golden scholarly scholar feast. He looked up, and discovered that there was something different about this feast. It was a very big and very special difference. That high and aloof table at the top belonged to the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. Could it be that he was going to participate in this feast personally? The other 4 sides should belong to the 3 princes and other members of the imperial family. The so-called other members of the imperial family were probably prince-equivalent Yang Huainong's faction. It couldn't be helped. The emperor of the Tianxiang Empire didn't have many children. Even his brothers didn't have many children. There should have been an extra table for Princess Raimu. But the princess should have been sharing it with the other ladies. There were a few tables not far away from them. Those were undoubtedly reserved for the heads of the aristocratic families. But why was there a single table at a slightly higher level? It seemed to be a transcendent table. But who was it for? This was truly unfathomable. Chapter 286. Below them were hundreds of tables that formed a large circle. In the middle of the circle, there was a large empty space. Could it be that this gifted scholar feast was going to have a performance? Could a man perform a song and dance? Normal men might not be able to do it, but perhaps those jealous scholars would be able to. The Golden Scholarly Autumn Banquet has begun, please take your seats. Jun Imo Xia followed a servant and sat down at the Jun family's table. He looked up and saw a man looking at him. It was Li Yuran. Young Master Li didn't have the leisure to look around like the young Master Jun. Instead, he had been paying attention to the debauchee Jun the entire time. So, he smiled faintly when he saw Jun Imo Xia looking at him. Then, he raised his empty glass in greeting. Jun Moxie snorted as he sat down and crossed his legs. This was the Jun family's trademark debauchee move. There was a faint fragrance coming from behind him. He didn't need to look to know that this was the fresh fragrance of a young girl. Although it was rare, it was not unfamiliar. Jun Dashao had tasted it many times around Dugu Xiaoyi. It seemed that the Dugu family was behind him. Jun Imo Xia didn't turn his head, but he could clearly feel that a pair of eyes were staring at him from behind. A pair of limpid autumn eyes were also looking at him from the upper seats. Jun Imo Xia raised his eyebrows and looked up to see Princess Ling Meng's blushing cheeks. She had turned her head to look at him. What's wrong with this woman? She couldn't have fallen for me, could she? Although the blood oath she made last time was quite serious, I really didn't take it seriously. As he thought of this, he suddenly felt a pain in his waist. Ha! Who could have hidden their murderous aura so well that they were able to sneak up on him without him noticing? When he turned around, he saw that it was Dugu Xiaoyi who had come over to talk to him. She saw that he and Princess Ling Meng were exchanging flirtatious glances. So, she pinched him hard. Jun Moxie gritted his teeth. How can I be bullied by a woman? Jun Dashao didn't even turn his head as he reached behind him. He didn't know where he touched, but he pinched it hard as revenge. But when he touched it, he only felt that it was smooth and soft, as if he was pinching a sponge, but it was also full of elasticity. Wow, it felt so good, Dugu Xiaoyi cried out in alarm. Jun Imo Xia exclaimed in admiration. His face was thicker than the walls of the city, and his face turned red as he withdrew his hand like lightning. However, everyone's eyes were focused on him, and it was clear that they had seen this scene. They saw that the little girl was standing there with a red face. Her posture was quite strange. She wanted to rub the place where she had been pinched, but she was too embarrassed to do so. In fact, she was so embarrassed that her eyes were almost welling up with tears. It turned out that Jun Moxie had pinched her fragrant buttocks. This was Jun Dashao. If it had been someone else, the little girl would have used a knife. In an instant, the sounds of discussion rose from all directions. There were sounds of hissing, sighs, and contemptuous sneers. At the same time, the entire hall was filled with rolling eyes. He didn't forget to flirt with a woman on such a serious occasion. He was truly worthy of the reputation of one of the four pests of the capital. Moreover, the person he was flirting with was the apple of the Dugu family's eye. So, he was even more audacious. The little girl had rushed over to talk to him. But, she saw that the little thief and Princess Raimu were exchanging flirtatious glances. So, she pinched him, turned around, and walked away. She was hoping that he would come after her to coax her. But, she hadn't expected that Jun Imo Xia's hand would quietly pinch her buttocks as soon as she turned around. The timing and the position were just right. Jun Imo Xia grabbed her perky buttocks, and pinched them as if they had rehearsed it in advance. the little girl's neck turned red when she saw that everyone was looking at her. She flew back to her seat and buried her head in her chest. Then, she covered it with her small hands. However, she still felt hot and dry. I've been touched in front of so many people. That little thief has touched me. But, I haven't done it with him yet. So, how can he? The little girl's sitting posture was still somewhat strange. She had pinched her buttocks in a very painful manner. So, she couldn't even walk properly. So, she had to adjust her posture. But, the more she adjusted her posture, the more strange it became. Jun Dashao was also sweating. He hadn't expected that he would grab her buttocks in such a coincidental manner. But, he hadn't expected that this little girl would look like a green apple. But, her body had already turned into a honey peach. If he had taken a bite. He couldn't help but think, if Dugu Xiaoyi hadn't turned around, where would she have grabbed based on the strength and position of that pinch? He suddenly laughed mischievously as he rubbed his fingers. He felt that it was still smooth. It seemed that the delicate feeling was still there. He couldn't help but sniff it. The fragrance assailed his nostrils. Jun Moxie had a wretched look on his face. Shameless bastard. He's truly the scum of the world. The few old masters present were so angry that their faces turned red, and their goat-like beards curled upwards. They were not ashamed of third young master Jun's vulgar behavior, but were instead proud of it. They wished they could chop off this little thief's hand. The group of youngsters looked at Jun Moxie with infinite contempt. They cursed him in their hearts. But, each and every one of them secretly rubbed their fingers. They were fantasizing about how good it would be if they could touch it. After all, it was one of the two great beauties of Tianxiang City. That guy had a look of enjoyment on his face. He was sniffing his fingers. It seemed very comfortable, very fragrant. Princess Raimu, who was sitting a few tables away, suddenly felt her buttocks go numb. Her pretty face turned red, and she snorted. She felt a faint sense of jealousy in her heart. The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard from outside the door. It was obvious that the important people had entered the venue. The two teachers of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute and the elders of the big families walked in with solemn steps. They had the demeanor of an immortal, and looked vigorous despite their age. Suddenly, the main hall became silent. It wasn't easy to provoke any one of these old guys. The three princes followed behind them. Each of them was amiable, and beaming with happiness. The Golden Scholarly Scholar Feast had officially begun. Various kinds of wine and dishes were constantly being served. The fragrance of food assailed the nostrils. However, no one dared to make a move. Even the debauches like Jun Dashao didn't dare to act rashly. This was because His Majesty the Emperor hadn't arrived yet. The real important people were always the last to appear. Jun Dashao obviously didn't care much about His Majesty the Emperor. However, he didn't want to stir up more trouble in these troubled times. A slow and heavy voice was heard from outside the hall while everyone was sitting still. It was solemn and respectful. Everyone craned their necks to look. They saw a certain fatty being led by a eunuch. He was walking towards them. It was Tang Yuan. Everyone was startled. Then, they burst into laughter. Tang Wanli suddenly stood up. His face was full of anger. Evil creature! Are you crazy? They saw that Tang Yuan's face was full of absent-mindedness. He was like a walking corpse. He walked step by step in a stupefied manner. The most outrageous thing was that he was carrying a chair on his back. It seemed as if the chair had grown from his buttocks. After being questioned by His Majesty the Emperor, although he didn't implicate Jun Moxie, His Majesty the Emperor thought himself clever and put the blame on Jun Wui. In Fatty Tang's eyes, wasn't this the same thing? This was a big deal. This was the only thought in Fatty's mind. Tang Yuan stood up absent-mindedly when he heard the Emperor's order for him to leave. He actually forgot to salute and bid farewell. His buttocks were a little too big, and the chair was a little too small. When he stood up, the chair also stood up, and directly stuck to his buttocks. Along the way, Tang Yuan was absent-minded, and his mind was preoccupied. Compared to his weight, the chair was really insignificant. Until now, he had not noticed it at all. Hearing everyone's laughter and his grandfather's reprimand, Tang Yuan seemed to wake up from a dream. He opened his eyes and saw that he had arrived at Cherishing Fragrance Hall. His face was full of tears like a child who had been wronged. Haha, young Master Tang is indeed an expert. He's different from the rest. He was afraid that there wouldn't be a seat here. So, he brought a chair with him. It's amazing. Meng Haizhou wasn't willing to let go of this opportunity. Everyone's laughter grew louder as soon as these words were spoken. Tang Wanli's old face turned purple. He jumped down from the chair and smashed it into pieces. His white beard fluttered in the wind as he looked around. Everyone who met his gaze couldn't help but stop laughing and lower their heads. Tang Wanli sighed as he saw his grandson in such a daze. He felt very distressed. I know that something has happened at His Majesty's place. Could it be that His Majesty doesn't care about our decades of friendship? Is he making things difficult for my grandson? However, this wasn't the time to ask about it. So, he had no choice but to let this matter go. However, he suddenly felt a person's body sway as he approached him. It was none other than the young Master Jun. Fatty, raise your head. Jun Moxie's voice was frivolous, and his movements were unsteady. However, only Tang Yuan could see that Jun Moxie's eyes were filled with warmth and determination. Even if the sky collapses, this elder brother can still hold it up. Come and drink with me. Jun Dashao laughed heartily. His first two sentences had been strung together into a single line, and had entered Tang Yuan's ears. However, it had been mixed with the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. Only the last sentence had been spoken loudly in a normal manner. But, everyone had heard it. Even if the sky collapses, this elder brother can still hold it up. These words were full of aggressiveness and fearlessness. It was like a reassuring pill that had penetrated into the depths of Fatty's heart. Tang Yuan's heart was suddenly shaken. His perplexed heart seemed to have suddenly become clear. His eyes slowly regained their vigor. He looked at Jun Moxie's indifferent face, and suddenly felt a warmth in his heart. He smiled mischievously and said, "It seems that the wine we're serving to the guests today is from the aristocratic hall's auction. Well, it's a big party. It would be strange if we didn't have some good wine. The third prince is quite good. He didn't embezzle it." The two men laughed mischievously and walked forward at the same time. Tang Wanli was flabbergasted. His mouth was wide open. He had seen his grandson's expression a moment ago. It was as if he had lost all hope in life. So, how did that little thief of the Jun family return to normal after saying, "Come and drink with me"? Chapter 287. Today's first update. Feng Ling will go out in the evening after half an hour. Update ahead of schedule. The old men felt that drinking with the youngsters was no longer interesting due to the intervention of the big shots. So, they called out to the youngsters, and drove them out. Then, the old men didn't follow the prearranged arrangement, and sat down at a table. Therefore, Jun Dashao, Fatty, the little girl, and the Duga family's heroes and warriors rushed forward. These 10 people naturally joined the two tables together. Coincidentally, the government also did the same thing. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time that these old men had done this. Li Yuran was sitting at the head of the table, and she was facing Jun Moxie. It's another coincidence. Tang Yuan was about to say something, but he was stopped by Jun Mo Xie's voice. This wasn't the time to talk. Even if it was important, it had to be done first. That was because Jun Moxie had discovered that there were 4 faintly discernible divine senses shrouding Tang Yuan's body ever since Tang Yuan had entered the room. He believed that these 4 people would be able to detect Tang Yuan's movements if he were to make a move. Jun Dashao's art of unlocking the heaven's fortune was very mysterious. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about being detected by them. If it were someone else, they would not have been able to hide those few voice transmissions. Therefore, he couldn't take any action at this time. So much so that after the scholarly autumn banquet was over, he and Tang Yuan couldn't talk about this matter for the time being. What kind of person was Jun Dashao? He had casually made a few jokes, and had amused Fatty Tang. Fatty Tang's frown disappeared, and his laughter became louder and louder. Even Dugu Xiaoyi, who had been on the verge of tears, giggled. She fiercely glared at Jun Moxie, and angrily said, "I don't care about you, you lecher." But it was obvious that she wasn't angry anymore. This girl's character was very cute. Although she was a bit irritable, it was easy to get up, and even easier to get down. Moreover, she didn't have any complicated schemes. Being together with such a girl, he would feel very relaxed and at ease. Jun Moxie smiled inwardly, and felt inexplicably comfortable. "Please welcome the distinguished guests from the Silver Blizzard City." The eunuch at the door shouted, and everyone's eyes turned to look at the door. Jun Moxie's sensitive senses told him that his grandfather's face had visibly spasmed for a moment, and then returned to normal. It was obvious that the word Silver Blizzard City had set off monstrous waves in Grandpa Jun's heart. The Silver Blizzard City has become the distinguished guests of the Tian Xiang Empire. Jun Moxie sneered inwardly, and narrowed his eyes. "I won't let you off lightly just by looking at the damage you've done to our Jun family." Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong were the first to enter the hall under the watchful eyes of everyone. They were followed by Han Yen Meng and Xiao Fengwu. All of them were clad in snow-white clothes. In fact, they looked like a snow lotus that had suddenly bloomed in the mortal world. Everyone in the hall felt an inexplicable coolness as soon as these four people entered. Jun Moxie looked on with cold eyes, and saw that these four people were sitting at a separate table. Jun Moxie sneered inwardly, and lost interest. How did that Xiao Fengwu recover so quickly? I'm well aware of the extent of my strength last time. Xiao Fengwu looks a bit pale, but he can still walk and move. This has already made Jun Moxie very puzzled. He shouldn't have recovered so quickly. How many days has it been? Jun Moxie suddenly felt a fluctuation in his sea of consciousness as the Hongjun Pagoda slowly rose up and rotated. This unusual movement made Jun Moxie feel a kind of joy. It was exactly the same as when he had snatched that strange jade pendant, but this time it was a bit stronger than the last time. Jun Moxie's heart suddenly moved. Could it be that there's another piece of the treasure that I had snatched last time? Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel as if he had once again seen a fat sheep. He couldn't help but feel excited in his heart. Well, I'll go out and play the role of a bandit again. It's such a waste to leave such a good thing in the hands of this kid. He's such a generous fat sheep. He's not satisfied with sending me the first time, and now he's sending me a second time. He looked up and saw Han Yen Meng making a face at him. She pouted her small mouth, and mouthed a few words, and then laughed. Hitman Jun looked at the shape of her lips, and quickly judged the meaning of those words. This was the basic skill of lip reading. But he hated this basic skill at this time, because he had clearly read it out. Good nephew, your aunt is here. This girl needs to be taught a lesson. I'll teach you a lesson when I have the opportunity. Who told you to pretend to be my elder? Jun Dashao lazily turned his head away. His Majesty the Emperor has arrived. The Emperor's belated arrival was followed by a resounding and seemingly convulsive eunuch's voice. Jun Moxie cursed in his heart, fuck. The dishes are getting cold. The golden scholarly feast had finally begun after a few repetitive procedures. Of course, it was time for Jun Moxie to start. But for those scholars who were waiting to jump into the Dragon's Gate, the feast hadn't started yet. The Emperor finally said, "Everyone, please do as you please." Then, Jun Moxie began to gorge himself at the speed of light. While everyone was still hesitating, modestly declining, more than half of the bear's paw had already entered his stomach. Can't you be a bit more civilized? If you eat like this, then other people won't be able to eat. Duguing grinned as he looked at Jun Imo Xia with white eyes. His hand had stopped in midair. The Dugu family's faces weren't thin. Although they weren't as thick as Jun Dashao's, they were still as thick as a city wall. Several of them had been aiming at that oily, honey-smelling bear's paw in the middle. But they had only stretched out their hands when they discovered that it had already entered June Moxie's mouth. Moreover, half of it had already entered his stomach. What kind of speed is this? This kind of action and eating speed was absolutely unimaginable for most of the aristocratic families. Even the June family and the Dugu family were no exception. It didn't matter how slovenly one usually was in this kind of feast. But they had to act a bit more reserved in this kind of occasion. Even if they had to act a bit, they would have to act a bit more reserved. Who wouldn't want to eat and drink this much? This was also the main reason why the Dugu brothers had acted a bit later than June Dashao. However, this unwritten rule was destined to be unsuitable for June Imo Xia. As a former top-notch assassin, June Imo Xia could go 3 days without eating, and still maintain his peak physical strength, alertness, and energy to complete his missions. Conversely, he could also eat 3 days' worth of food for an ordinary person, or even more. Moreover, young Master June had come here to show that he was a debauchee. So, only a fool wouldn't eat quickly if he wasn't able to show off his debauchee in such a logical manner. Moreover, he was able to eat to his heart's content. Civilized? How much is it worth? June Imo Xia snorted and smiled. Then, he reached out and took the small bowl of greasy and somewhat transparent soup. He poured half of it into the little girl's bowl, and was about to give the rest to Tang Yuan. But then, he saw several hairy hands reaching out to snatch it. So, he hurriedly raised the bowl and tilted it downwards. Then, he opened his mouth wide, and poured the soup into his stomach with a schwat sound. It was as if a river had flowed backwards. Then, he gurgled, and couldn't help but frown. It's cooked too badly. I didn't even chew it. June Dashao naturally knew what was good. He could smell that this was pure tiger penis soup. It was very nutritious. Tang Yuan raised his bowl to receive the soup. The heroes and legends rushing forward brothers' eyes were perfectly round. It seemed as if they were about to explode with rage. The people at the other tables hadn't even moved their chopsticks, but the best food on their table was all gone. That brat who had gotten the advantage was still talking nonsense. What kind of person was this? We were people who had been in the army, but we weren't as fast as him. Is your fucking throat straight? Fuck. So fast. Why didn't you choke to death? The 7 brothers cursed together. What kind of soup is this? Is there a need to snatch it like this? Dugu Xiaoyi's big eyes narrowed into a crescent moon. She felt extremely happy. There were 10 people at the table, but older brother Imo Xia only gave her a bowl. What did this mean? What did this mean? What did this mean? The little girl was quite satisfied. She picked up the bowl and took a sip. She felt that there was a slight fishy smell, but there were pieces of carrot-sized strips inside. When she chewed, it was quite tasty. The more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. I'll just eat your food. As long as it's delicious, I don't care what it is. June Moxie was startled. He stretched out his hand and another guy snatched a plate of crab and placed it in front of Dugu Xiaoyi. Eat this. The 7 Dugu brothers were greatly shocked just now. But now, they were all dumbfounded. It was only now that they remembered that they were fighting for food. So, they immediately fought with Tang Yuan. Under June Dashao's lead, Fatty Tang, who had only held back for a moment, didn't dare to be negligent. He was an expert in the art of eating. Even though the Dugu brothers were from the military school and ate at an extremely fast speed, they were still no match for this brother. Fatty started to attack from both sides. He created whatever he saw. In a split second, the table had become a mess of dishes and bowls. The table that was originally full was now empty in the middle. Everyone was using their hands to support the table. There were several dishes in their arms. Each of them had a vigilant look in their eyes as they buried their heads in their food. Suddenly, they realized that there was not the slightest movement around them. So, they looked up in confusion. But they saw that everyone's eyes were fixed on this table. Everyone's eyes were widened in shock, and their faces were filled with disbelief. The other tables hadn't even started yet. But this table was already empty. Duge Zongheng, Jun Zhantian, and Tang Wanli were shocked. Their faces had turned red. The other old men looked at them meaningfully. They couldn't wait to grab these shameful people and beat them up. Old Jun, I finally believe that Jun Sunshao is indeed a direct descendant of the Jun family. It can't be faked. Even though he hasn't stepped onto the battlefield, he already has the characteristics of a military disciple. The Murong family's patriarch, Murong Fengyun, shook his head. His expression was somewhat serious. The meaning behind his words was thought-provoking. It's good that you know. Jun Zhantian glared at him. The other old men were not happy. They asked, Brother Murong, why do you think so? Look at this. Murong Fengyun pointed at Jun Moxie, who had 2 hands and 1 mouth, and said, this brat's shameless appearance is very similar to Jun Zhantian's style in the past. This old man would be blind if he couldn't see it. The entire hall roared with laughter. The corner of the emperor's mouth twitched. He coughed in a low voice. He didn't want to disturb the banquet because of these youngsters' nonsense. So, he raised his wine cup and expressed his gratitude. Everyone stood up and expressed their gratitude in unison. The curtains of the Golden Scholarly Feast officially opened as the #1 expert of Tianxiang led the first cup of wine into their stomachs. Everyone knew that the next event would be a competition of talents. And all the civil and military officials present were the judges. Chapter 288. Today's the second update. I'm going out to drink wine and bird. I haven't left this neighborhood for more than half a month. He coughed lightly twice, and the doddering instructor of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute, Mei Gaojia, stood up in a trembling manner. He first saluted the emperor, and then made a bow with his hands clasped in front of him. Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, this Golden Scholarly Scholars Feast is held on the Double Ninth Festival. This is a good time of life. This old man represents the thousands of students of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute to congratulate Your Majesty for many autumns and 10,000 generations. May the heavens bless our Tianxiang, and may our people prosper and prosper. May our civil and military affairs flourish, and we may soon conquer the various countries of the continent. Then, we may unify the world, and benefit the common people. Today's feast is all thanks to Your Majesty's vast and mighty grace. Apart from the imperial examinations, you are not sticking to a single pattern. Instead, you are promoting talented people. This is my. He was long-winded and long-winded. But, he only got to the point of passing the door. He was about to enter the main topic when a voice suddenly complained in a low voice, this is a magnificent imperial feast. We haven't even eaten a few mouthfuls of food, and it's already finished. This is too unjustifiable. Fatty. I understand that you have a big stomach. But, shouldn't you also understand the few of us? How can you eat like this? The dishes on the table have almost been finished by you in such a short time. This voice didn't sound very loud. In fact, it seemed as if he had deliberately lowered his voice. But, no one in the Great Hall spoke a word at this time. Everyone was holding their breath in silence. In fact, it was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone had heard this voice clearly. And, a strange expression appeared on their faces. The one who had spoken was Jun Moxie. Jun Dashao had the intention of stirring things up. So, he naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. As for Tang Yuan, he was holding half a crab in his hand. He looked at Jun Moxie with a stunned expression on his face. It seemed as if he had been greatly wronged. Eldest brother, who ate more between the two of us? I ate a lot. But, I couldn't catch up to you by half. Aren't your words too heartless? Mei Gaojia was in the middle of giving his speech with deep emotion. But, he was suddenly interrupted by this noise. He couldn't help but get angry. The topic that had been interrupted had been spoken by such a shameless person. And that person had become even more furious. His lips were trembling as he was about to rebuke this person. But he heard a rough voice that sounded like a broken gong. I've seen shameless people. But I've never seen such a shameless person. He obviously ate all the good stuff himself. But he still has the nerve to frame others for eating too much. What kind of person is this? It was Duguing. Duguing had always been indignant about not being able to snatch the bear's paw, so of course he had to stand up and express his dissatisfaction. He did not deliberately speak loudly, but this man was tall and strong, so even if he spoke at a normal volume, it was no different from a normal person shouting loudly. In addition to Jun Dashao's mischief, the entire audience naturally heard it. In terms of the level of noise, it was even higher than Jun Dashao's. When Jun Moxie saw that someone was helping him, he became even more excited. He curled his lips and said, "How can I not eat quickly? Damn it. Other families come with only 1 or 2 people. But your family is different. You have more than a dozen people in your family. And all of them are plump and strong. Moreover, they are all sitting at the same table. So, I reckon that I won't even get to drink the soup if I don't eat quickly." Fatty Tang hastily stood up with great difficulty, and tried to smooth things over. "Third young master, there's nothing wrong with this. After all, he doesn't need to pay for this meal." Even the aloof and remote emperor couldn't help but let out a strange pfff sound as soon as these words were spoken. Those old men were laughing in an evil manner. Only Dugu Zongheng was glaring at Fatty. It seemed as if he wanted to eat him alive. Suddenly, the solemn hall was filled with the sounds of people covering their mouths and laughing. Mei Gao Jie's entire body trembled in anger. He was about to speak when a strange voice ridiculed him. "The Jun family's people are so arrogant and despotic. Their reputation is well deserved." Everyone was surprised. They looked towards the source of the voice, and saw that the person who had spoken was dressed in white. He was seated in the seat of honor. He was the distinguished guest of this banquet, Xiao Fengwu from the Silver Blizzard City. Xiao Fengwu was naturally aware of the matter between his uncle Xiao Han and the Jun family's young master. Moreover, the little princess Han Yen Meng had been proudly claiming that she had recognized a junior ever since she had returned from the Jun family. This had made the possessive Xiao Dashao very uncomfortable. Therefore, he had taken the initiative to ridicule Xiao Fengwu. "This is..." Jun Moxie acted as if he didn't know him. "My surname is Xiao. I'm from the Silver Blizzard City Xiao family. My name is Xiao Fengwu." Xiao Fengwu's eyebrows twitched as he laughed mischievously. Then, he stuck out his chest, and unfolded a folding fan in his hand. He slowly waved it twice, and swept his gaze over the table of beauties. His movements were very natural and unrestrained. "That's a good name." Li Yuran, who was sitting on one side, spoke up, "Brother Xiao, your name is truly extraordinary. It's like an immortal's aura. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." The Xiao family and the Jun family had a grudge against each other. So, Li Yuran naturally wanted to make use of this opportunity. Speaking of my name, I do have a history." Xiao Fengwu was very proud of himself. He had been scratched by Li Yuran. So, he explained in detail, "It is said that my mother had a dream on the night of my birth. She dreamt that a phoenix had landed on a parasol tree. Therefore, she named me Fengwu. That's a heaven-sent name." Li Yuran clapped her hands in admiration. "Ha ha!" Jun Moxie burst into laughter. "What are you laughing at?" Xiao Fengwu looked at him angrily. How could he be interrupted while he was feeling proud of himself? "It's nothing. I'm just thinking that your mother is really good at dreaming. She actually dreamt that a phoenix had landed on a parasol tree. And then, you were named Fengwu. That's a good name, a good name." Jun Moxie tried to hold back his laughter. But, he couldn't. He continued to sway back and forth for a while. Then, he said, I'm thinking that if your mother hadn't dreamed of a phoenix and a parasol tree that night, and had instead dreamed of a chicken that had landed on a banana tree, then, what would you be called now? You must know that dreams are unpredictable. So, you're very lucky to be called by your current name. His Majesty choked on a mouthful of wine. His face turned red as he coughed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A dream of a chicken that had landed on a banana tree? This, then, they thought of Xiao Fengwu's surname. So, everyone suddenly came to their senses. Everyone wanted to laugh. But, everyone had misgivings about the might of the Silver Blizzard City. So, they didn't dare to laugh out loud. In fact, several people had choked on their laughter. What do you mean? Xiao Fengwu was somewhat puzzled. So, he subconsciously asked. Then, he suddenly realized something, and his face turned cold. June Moxie, you dare to scold me? I scolded you. What did I scold you for? June Moxie had an innocent look on his face. Even if you're a member of the Silver Blizzard City Xiao family, you can't be unreasonable, right? To catch an adulterous couple, to catch a thief, you must catch the stolen goods. So, you must have evidence to back up your words. You obviously scolded me. Xiao Fengwu's words were on the tip of his tongue. But, he finally realized that he had almost been fooled. So, he couldn't help but roar in anger, June Moxie, I'll kill you. The Silver Blizzard City is truly formidable. It's worthy of being called the most powerful force in the world. June Moxie shook his head and exclaimed in admiration, you've been treated like a national guest in someone else's country. You've even been invited to the Imperial Palace. You've even dared to openly clamor about killing the only grandson of an important military official in front of the eyes of the entire country's civil and military officials. And, you've even faced the great emperor himself. You've even dared to openly clamor about killing the only grandson of an important military official. Such courage is truly admirable. The faces of the ministers turned unsightly as they heard this. Yes, he wants to kill the only grandson of an important military official in front of the emperor. How arrogant would he be if he were to leave the imperial palace? Xiao Han hastily stood up and forced his nephew to sit down. He then cupped his hands in obeisance and apologized. Fengwu is still young, and doesn't understand the affairs of the world. Xiao Han obviously didn't care about the imperial family. But, he didn't want to rashly make an enemy out of the imperial family of any country. After all, the Supreme Treaty of Alliance had a very strong binding force. Besides, they had invited him and the others with good intentions. If they were to provoke the Tianxiang Empire into becoming enemies with them, then it would be because they were too insensible. And, this matter wouldn't be pleasant to hear. His Majesty the Emperor smiled magnanimously, indicating that it didn't matter. June Moxie had no choice but to sit down. Dugu Xiaoyi came over and opened her big round eyes. She then asked curiously, a chicken fell on a banana tree. What's its name? June Moxie almost fell under the table. He rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly, well, you can ask your brother about it. He certainly knows. I've said so much just now. My mouth is too dry. Let me drink some water first. Dugu Xiaoyi snorted and rolled her eyes at him. Then, she turned her head to ask Dugu Ying. Dugu Ying's black face turned purple in a split second. How can I explain this to my little sister as an elder brother? She couldn't help but stare fiercely at June Xia as she stammered her refusal. However, Dugu Xiaoyi wasn't satisfied with this. She pouted her small mouth and acted like a spoiled child while threatening them. This caused the 7 Dugu brothers to be battered and exhausted. Seeing the awkward atmosphere in the hall, another instructor of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute, Kong Lingyang, stood up and said, last year's Golden Scholarly Talent Banquet, the geniuses and talented women of the various aristocratic families fought against our Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. Our Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute was lucky enough to come out on top. But, no one was able to defeat Grand Preceptor Li's eldest grandson, young Master Li. Today, a few disciples wish to seek advice from young Master Li. What do you think? Everyone's spirits were roused. The main event is finally here. The eyes of the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute also shone. The scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute hadn't been able to eat since they had entered the hall. But they had been waiting for this moment. If they could stump the #1 scholar of Tianxiang, then they would at least prove that they were superior in terms of knowledge. And this would undoubtedly be very beneficial for their future. Li Yuran smiled faintly. Then, she stood up gracefully, and looked at everyone with a gentle look in her eyes. She then said, Yu Yuran's talent is shallow. So, how can I stand up to the scholars? However, if you wish to seek advice from me, then there's another person in front of me. His knowledge and wisdom are both admirable. So, you might as well seek advice from him. May I dare to ask, young master? Who is this genius? Everyone asked in unison. They were puzzled in their hearts. Could it be that there's a peerless genius in Tianxiang City who can convince Li Yuran? Why haven't we heard of him before? This is very strange. It's none other than Jun Moxie, young Master Jun. Li Yuran smiled faintly, and replied in a sincere tone. Then, she pointed her finger at Jun Dashao. Her target was very clear. Jun Moxie was holding a chicken leg in his hand. His mouth was covered in grease. So, he couldn't help but fiercely glare at Li Yuran. Crap! You're setting me up in public. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.